This is Audible.
Highbridge Company presents 101 Great Answers to the Toughest Interview Questions by Ron Fry, read by the author.
I still break out in a cold sweat remembering it. I had burned the midnight oil the night before my first job interview, preparing to knock 'em dead. First, I pored over old class notes to refresh myself on the basic skills I would need to perform the proofreading job I was applying for. Cool and confident, I was ready to detail all my previous work experience. Never mind that it was a part-time summer job in the local grocery store. It showed that I was responsible, versatile, resourceful. In other words, management material. I knew my prospective employer would be dazzled, but I wanted to leave no doubt that I was the right man for the job. So I came up with 10 show-stopping questions about the company. By that time, I knew their bottom line better than my own. This was going to be no sweat. And it started out that way. When Mr. Hogan came out to the reception area to greet me, he looked like a pushover. In no time at all, I thought smugly, they'd be thanking their lucky stars for hiring me. And one day soon, by gosh, I'd have Hogan's job. After taking a moment to study my resume, Mr. Hogan looked up at me and said, "So, tell me about yourself." My mind went blank. I smiled nervously as I desperately tried to remember any of the little speeches I had so diligently rehearsed. I couldn't think of where to begin, so I rambled. To make a long and excruciating story short, I didn't get that job, let alone Mr. Hogan's. And I've often suspected it was because I just couldn't tell him a little about myself. Instead of giving up, I decided to plunge into the interviewing process with even more gusto. Fortunately, and only after a lot more interviews, I got better. And as a veteran of the other side of the desk, I've hired more than 100 people, interviewed more than 1,000. I can tell you that interviewing is a more serious business than ever before. Let's face it, interviewing was never easy. But of all the tools in your professional arsenal, your ability to shine in your initial interview can make or break your chances for a shot at the job. Like playing the piano, interviewing takes practice. And practice does make perfect. This is the recording I wish I'd listened to the night before facing old Hogan, who probably still has that job. Will you have to answer all 101 questions included here? Certainly not in one interview. But chances are, the questions tomorrow's interviewer doesn't ask will be on the tip of the next interviewer's tongue. Most interviewers are not trying to torture you for sport. They use these tough questions to get right to the heart of specific issues. Their motive is to quickly learn enough about you to make a decision. When you know what they're looking for, you can give them the information they seek and reduce your own fear and anxiety at the same time. So beginning with that opening killer question, tell me a little about yourself. Here are all the questions I fielded. Is this the ultimate crib sheet? Sort of. But I hope you'll take it a step further and use these questions as the basis for some thoughtful self-exploration. You'll need to be prepared to think for yourself, on your feet, not by the seat of your pants. After an introduction to the process of interviewing, I'll ask you to write down your answers to the questions presented, using my advice and examples as guidelines. I urge you to spend time refining these answers. Polish them until they glitter. Take time to memorize some, I'll tell you which ones, so you can repeat them verbatim to the interviewer in a way that sounds spontaneous and enthusiastic, not tired and rehearsed. It might sound like a daunting challenge, but I assure you, by the time you've finished this recording, you'll actually be looking forward to the challenge of your next job interview. So good luck, and try to keep those palms dry. Think of the last salesperson who really sold you something. How did he or she do it? Probably not by using hard sell tactics or a slick spiel. Instead, this person probably took the time to understand your needs and explain how each feature of the product you were considering would meet them. The interviewing process is also a kind of sale. In this case, you are the product, and you are the salesperson. If you show up unprepared to talk about your unique features and benefits, you're not likely to motivate an interviewer to buy. In other words, you won't get the job. The sad fact is that many job candidates are unprepared to talk about themselves. You may have prepared a gorgeous resume and cover letter, be wearing the perfect clothes, but if you can't convince the interviewer that you are the right person for the job, you aren't going to make the sale. First, let's get you ready to comfortably answer one and only one question. Who are you? The entire interview will hinge on how well you know and can speak about this single topic. I'm assuming that, like most people, you are a complex product made up of a unique blend of abilities, skills, and personal qualities, and shaped by your own personal and professional history. Believe me, the time you spend outlining the details of your own life will pay off in interviews and ultimately job offers. This section will guide you through the process. You already know your life by heart. After all, you've been living it for the last few decades, right? But you'll be amazed to see how much detail you can remember, and ultimately how it will fit together in the context of your next career move once you write it down. So your first step is to build a complete dossier on yourself. You'll need to prepare 8 data input sheets to help you organize important work-related information about yourself. Detailed instructions are included with this package. With this information in place, it will be easier to develop a concise and convincing answer to almost any interview question, an answer that will set you apart from the competition. First, let's prepare an employment data input sheet using a separate sheet for every full-time and part-time job you've ever held, no matter how short the tenure. Even summer jobs are important here. They demonstrate resourcefulness, responsibility, and initiative. For each employer, include the name, address, and telephone number, the names of all your supervisors, and, whenever possible, where they can be reached, letters of recommendation, especially if they can't be reached, and the exact dates, month, and year you were employed. For each job, include your specific duties and responsibilities, such as financial responsibilities or purchasing authority. Include supervisory experience, noting the number of people you managed, specific skills required for the job, your key accomplishments, the dates you received promotions, any awards, honors, or special recognition you received. In addition, for each part-time job, include the number of hours you worked per week. Don't write a book about each job, but do concentrate on writing down specific data: volume of work handled, problem solved, dollars saved, that will provide an objective measurement of your abilities and accomplishments. Believe me, these hard facts will add a powerful punch to your interview presentation. For example, write 1 or 2 sentences giving an overview of the tasks you handled in each of the jobs you held. Use numbers as often as possible to demonstrate the scope of your responsibilities. For example, an experienced salesperson might write, responsible for managing 120 active accounts in sales territory that contributed $3 million in annual revenues. Reviewed activity of 3 telephone salespeople. Name the specific skills you had to have to perform your duties, highlighting those that you developed on the job. The same salesperson might write, trained other sales staff in new product lines, handled telephone support for customer base of 10,000. Then list your key accomplishments. This is the place to brag, but be sure to back up each accomplishment with specifics, including measurable results. For example, developed new call reporting system that increased volume in territory 20% within 18 months. Oversaw computerization of department that helped realize cost savings of 15%. After-hours activities can mean a lot to employers, so take some time to make a detailed record of your volunteer pursuits using the enclosed volunteer work data input sheet. For each volunteer organization, include the name, address, and telephone number, the name of your supervisor or the director of the organization, letters of recommendation, the dates, month and year, of your involvement with the organization. For each volunteer experience, include the approximate number of hours you devoted to the activity each month, your specific duties and responsibilities, specific skills required, accomplishments, and any awards, honors, or special recognition you received. Next, prepare an educational data input sheet. If you're a recent college graduate or still in college, you don't need to rehash your high school experiences. If you have a graduate degree or are a graduate student, however, you should list details on both graduate and undergraduate coursework. If you're still in school and graduation is more than a year away, indicate the number of credits you've already earned through the most recent semester completed. I'm always impressed by candidates who talk about books they've read and activities they enjoy. So make a list of all these sports, clubs, and other activities in which you've participated inside or outside of school. For each activity, club, or group, include its name and purpose, any offices you held, special committees you formed, chaired, or participated in, the duties and responsibilities of each role, key accomplishments, and any awards or honors you received. List all the awards and honors you've received from schools, community groups, church groups, clubs, and so on the fifth data input sheet. You may include prestigious awards from high school, even if you're in graduate school or long out of college. Many employers are impressed by the maturity of candidates who have served in the armed forces. Some may consider military service excellent management training for many civilian jobs. So if you've served in the armed forces, even for a short time, make sure you can discuss your experiences and how it would be pertinent to your professional aspirations. Include the branch in which you served, final rank awarded, duties and responsibilities, citations and awards, details on specific training and/or any special schooling, special skills developed, and key accomplishments. Even if you're not applying for a job in the international arena, your ability to read, write, and speak a second language can make you invaluable to employers in an increasing number of research and educational institutions and multinational companies. 1 year of college Russian won't cut it, but if you spent a year studying in Moscow and can carry on a conversation with a native, by all means write it down. Once you've completed these forms, you'll have a lot of information about what you've done and where and when you did it. But any interviewer worth his or her proverbial salt will be looking for more. So once you've finished with your fact-finding, practice putting it all in perspective. Write down your answers to the following questions. Which achievements did you enjoy most? Which are you proudest of? Be ready to tell the interviewer how these accomplishments can add to the position at hand. What mistakes have you made? Why did they occur? How have you learned from them? What have you done to keep similar things from occurring again? How well do you interact with authority figures, bosses, teachers, even your parents? Now it's time to get to know yourself just a little better by tackling some tougher questions. Remember, these answers are for your eyes only, so swallow hard and be honest. What are your favorite games in sports? Think about the way you play them and what that says about you. Are you overly competitive? Or do you give up too easily? Are you a good loser or a bad winner? Do you rise to a challenge or run away from it? What kinds of people are your friends? Do you associate only with people who are very similar to you? Do you enjoy differences in others or merely tolerate them? What are some things that have caused you to end friendships? What does this say about you? If you were to ask a group of friends and acquaintances to describe you, what adjectives would they use? List all of them, the good and the bad. Why would people describe you this way? Are there specific behaviors, skills, achievements, or failures that seem to identify you in the eyes of others? What are they? By now you're probably a bit uncomfortable and wondering, what's the point of all this soul searching? Hey, I'm just trying to get ready for a job interview. The point is this: the better you know yourself, the better you can sell yourself to a prospective employer when you're on the spot in an interview. The best way to sell a product is to describe its best features, as well as the benefits of each of those features. But if you aren't also prepared to answer objections about the product's weaker points, you won't be in a strong position to convince a savvy buyer to buy. From your data input sheets, you can compile a list of your best features under the following headings: my strongest skills, my greatest areas of knowledge, my greatest personality strengths, the things I do best, my key accomplishments. Now, transform your best features into benefits for your prospective company. What in my personal inventory will convince this employer that I deserve the position? What are the strengths, achievements, skills, and areas of knowledge that make me most qualified for this position? What in my background should separate me from the herd of other applicants? By answering some tough questions about the mistakes you've made and the less than positive feedback you've gotten, you can also locate areas that need improvement. Do you need to develop new skills? Improve your relations with those in authority? If you have been thorough and brutally honest, you may find out things about yourself that you never knew. So also write down, which of my weaknesses should I admit to when asked? How will I explain the ways I've improved? If you're still not convinced about the value of putting in this much work, keep listening. Just hearing the questions that follow should indicate gaps in your own answers to some of them if you try to wing it. The more time and effort you invest in filling in the gaps now, while you have a cool head, the less you'll sweat once you're in the interviewer's hot seat. But before we forge ahead to the first of the questions you're likely to field, let's take a closer look at the interview process itself. The days of landing a job after a single, easy interview are long gone. These days, interviewers and hiring managers are reluctant to leave anything to chance. Many have begun to experiment with the latest techniques for data gathering and analysis. For employers, interviewing has become a full-fledged science. Times are tougher for companies, so it's natural to assume that interviews will be tougher for their prospective employees. In the many years I've subscribed to human resources journals, I've noticed an increasing number of new interviewing methods developed to help interviewers measure how well prospective employees would perform on the job. The database interview, the situational interview, and the confrontational stress interview are only a few of the special treatments you might encounter on your way to landing the ideal job. Consider the following. Rampant downsizing has left fewer jobs. At the same time, the amount of money it takes to land a suitable candidate has escalated dramatically in recent years. Lawsuits against employers for wrongful discharge have also increased exponentially. Hiring mistakes can be costly, making it more important than ever for companies to be sure the people they do hire will be right for the job. Although the labor force is shrinking as a result of the baby bust, you can expect to bump into fellow candidates at every level of experience on the way to or from your first interviewer or your fourth. Where does that leave you? More employers seem to be looking for someone with experience, confidence, and the initiative to learn what he or she needs to know. Someone who requires very little supervision. Someone with a hands-on attitude. Because employers can't tell all that from a job application and a handshake, you'll probably have to go through more interviews than your predecessors for the same job. Knowledge and experience still give you an inside edge. But these days, your honesty, intelligence, mental health, even the toxicity of your blood may be measured before you can be considered fully assessed. You may also have to tiptoe through a minefield of different types of interview situations and keep your head to survive as a new hire. But no matter what kind of interview you find yourself in, do all you can to remain confident and flexible and ready with your answers. This approach should carry you through with flying colors. Let's take a brief, no-consequences tour of the interview circuit. The first level of interview is the screening interview. If you're pursuing a job at any organization of more than 250 employees, your first interview is likely to begin in the Human Resources Department. What can you expect? Let's say you're applying for your dream job as a middle manager at ABC Widget Company. Arriving on time for your first interview, you're greeted by Heather. Heather is a lower-level person in the Human Resources Department. She's been given a bare-bones introduction to the duties and responsibilities you must have to operate successfully in the position you're after. If she's not completely up to speed, it's probably not her fault. The person who will manage this new position may not have had time to fill out a detailed position description or to tell Heather exactly what he or she is looking for. Regardless of how much she's got to go on, Heather's job is pretty simple. Weed out the number of candidates whose resumes jibe with the short version of the job description. After you've gotten through the preliminaries, Heather is likely to follow a script. She will ask questions to see if you have the qualifications for the position, the appropriate degree, the right amount of experience, a willingness to relocate, and so on. Heather will be trying to determine whether you've been completely truthful on your resume. Did you work where and when you claim? Did you have the titles and responsibilities you're bragging about? Did you make the money you've stated? The screening interview may also drift into a few qualitative areas. Does she think you're sufficiently enthusiastic? Do you sound intelligent? Exhibit any obvious emotional disturbances? Are you articulate? Energetic? Are you the type of person who would fit well within the department and the company? Your first interview may be by telephone. Many companies are turning to the telephone to save interviewers the time it takes to meet candidates in the office. So it's someone like Heather who is likely to give you a ring. What could be better than answering questions from the comfort of your home? Wrong. For starters, you've lost at least 2 valuable tools you have to work with during in-office interviews: eye contact and body language. You're left with your skills, your resume, and your ability to communicate verbally. And here's a warning about communicating with human resources professionals. They approach the task of interviewing in a scientific manner. They're trained to elicit honest answers. They may be pleasant, polite, and accommodating, but they aren't likely to be reassuring or enthusiastic. In a telephone interview situation, when you're limited to voice contact, this can be especially unsettling. Don't be discouraged. Always project a positive image through your voice and your answers. Don't overdo it, but don't let the telephone be your undoing either. If your confidence is flagging, try smiling while you listen and speak. It might look silly, but it works, and Heather can't see you anyway. But trust me, she can hear the smile. Another important point: you have the right to be prepared for any interview. Chances are the interviewer will call you to set a time for the telephone interview. However, if Heather wants to plow right into it as soon as you answer the phone, there is nothing wrong with asking if she could call back at a mutually agreeable time. You need to prepare your surroundings for a successful interview. If the kids are fighting in the background, or you're expecting a package, or call waiting keeps beeping and interrupting, you're in trouble before you start. So don't. Have the interviewer call you back. No matter where the interview is conducted, if you pass the screening hurdle, Heather may resort to an arsenal of professional interviewing techniques. Remember, she has been trained and practiced in the science of interviewing. But once you get past the gate, be careful of what's on the other side. You may face the stress interview. Anyone who's been through one of these never forgets it. The stress interview is designed to cut through the veneer of pleasantries right to the heart of the matter and see what a candidate is really made of. I was subjected to a stress interview before I'd even heard of the technique, which is not the best way to prepare, believe me. Several years ago, I applied for an editorial position at a major publishing company. I made it past the first hurdle, a screening interview conducted in the corporate office. Next, I was invited to come back to meet Carrie, the director of personnel. After greeting me pleasantly, Carrie led me back to her rather palatial office. We chatted for a few minutes as I settled in. Then everything changed. Suddenly, I was undergoing an interrogation. Assuming that I had been given good reviews by the screening interviewer, I was shocked when Carrie started zeroing in on me. First, she questioned my credentials. Why, she wondered sarcastically, had I majored in liberal arts rather than something practical? She demanded to know what in the world made me think I could edit a magazine, even though I had been doing it quite well for a number of years. Each successive question skittered in a dizzying new direction. If the first question was about my work experience, the next launched into my fitness routine. Then my favorite movie. Carrie's questions did exactly what I later discovered they were intended to do. They made me feel confused, fearful, and hostile. I'll admit it, I behaved badly. I answered most of her questions in monosyllables, avoiding her eyes. Needless to say, I was not offered the job. But I did learn some valuable lessons from Carrie that day. Never let them see you sweat. No matter how stressful the situation, stay calm. Never take your eyes from the interviewer. When he or she finishes asking a question, take a few seconds to compose yourself and then, and only then, answer it. Recognize the situation for what it is. Nothing more than an artificial scenario designed to see how you react under pressure. The interviewer probably has nothing against you personally. Don't become despondent. It's easy to think that your chances for completing the interview process are nil. That's not necessarily the case. The stress interview is designed to see if you will become depressed, hostile, and flustered when the going gets tough, just as I did. Watch your tone of voice. It's easy to become sarcastic, or worse, during a stress interview, especially if you don't realize what the interviewer is up to. When all of this is over and done, and you've survived, you may question whether you really want a job with a company that utilizes such techniques. If they think insulting and belittling you during the interview are effective tools, what's their management philosophy? Bread, water, and torture? What would happen if everyone else called in sick and the hypothetical question should start a red light flashing in your mind? We'll talk more about these devils later. But for now, such an if question should alert you you're about to undergo an increasingly popular type of interview, the situational interview. The premise is sound. Present the candidate with situations that might occur on the job in order to gauge the degree to which he or she demonstrates the traits that will lead to success. But what's good for the interviewer is often deadly for the interviewee. You will have to devote a great deal of thought to each of these questions. If you find yourself caught in this snare, stay calm and use the homework you have done on your personal inventory to untangle yourself. The hypothetical is just too iffy for some interviewers. This breed is more comfortable staying in the realm of the known, so they will dig deep into your past experience, hoping to learn more about how you have already behaved in a variety of on-the-job situations. Then they'll attempt to use this information to extrapolate your future reactions on this job. How did you handle yourself in some really tight spots? What kinds of on-the-job disasters have you survived? Did you do the right thing? What were the repercussions of your decisions? Be careful what you say. Every situation you faced was unique, so be sure to let the interviewer in on specific limitations you had to deal with. Did you lack adequate staff or support from management? If you made the mistake of plunging in too quickly, say so and admit that you've learned to think things through. Explain what you do differently the next time around. That said, my advice would be to steer away from the specifics of a particular situation and emphasize the personal strengths and expertise you'd feel comfortable bringing to any challenge you're likely to face. Today, people at every level of a company are more likely to become involved in a variety of projects and tasks, including interviewing you for the job you're after. The team interview can range from a pleasant conversation to a torturous interrogation. Typically, you will meet a group of interviewers around a table in a conference room. They may be members of your prospective department or a cross-section of employees from throughout the company with whom you might work at some time or other in your new position. The hiring manager or someone from human resources may chair an orderly session of question and answer, or turn the entire group loose to shoot questions at you like a firing squad. When it's all over, You'll have to survive the assessment of every member of the group. Some hiring managers consult with the group after the interview for a reading on your performance. Others determine their decision using group consensus. The good news is that you don't have to worry that the subjective opinion of just one person will determine your shot at the job. Just take your time and treat every member of the team with the same respect and deference you would the hiring manager. And be diplomatic. Policies and procedures that you are critical of may be embraced by your peers. Don't blow the interview by offending them. If you make it past the screening interview, you'll reach level 2, the hiring interview. But don't relax yet. The hiring manager is sure to lack some or all of the screening interviewer's knowledge, experience, and skill, making him or her a very unpredictable animal. Few of them have had formal training in conducting interviews of any kind. To make things worse, most managers feel slightly less comfortable conducting the interview than the nervous candidate sitting across from them. So more often than necessary, perfectly qualified candidates walk out the door for good simply because the manager failed at the interview. But that doesn't have to happen to you. You should be prepared to put your best foot forward, no matter what the manager who is interviewing you does or says. That begins with having answers to 101 questions at the ready. But it doesn't stop there. The interviewer may not ask any of these questions. What do you do then? Simply put, you're a step ahead of the game if you realize at the outset that managers who are interviewing to hire are after more than just facts about your skills and background. They are waiting for something more elusive to hit them, something they themselves may not be able to articulate. They want to feel that somehow you fit the organization or department. Talk about a tough hurdle. But rather than sit back passively and hope for the best, you can help this unskilled interviewer focus on how your unique skills can directly benefit the organization using a number of specific examples. One word of caution: don't come on so strong that General Patton would have been proud to claim paternity. You'll come off as overzealous and self-serving. Just keep quietly and confidently underlining your skills and abilities and enthusiastically showing how well these puzzle pieces seem to fit the job at hand. Here's how to ace any interview. First, relax. Try to enjoy yourself. Imagine that the interviewer is a sports star, a famous author, or your favorite movie celebrity. You'll still be nervous, but you'll be able to focus more on the job. Believe me, that will do wonders to cultivate the interviewer's interest in you. Keep smiling, no matter what. Don't wear a pasted-on grin that will eventually wear down to a grimace. Just maintain a pleasant, relaxed smile. Put yourself in the interviewer's place. Who wouldn't want to work with such an agreeable person? Be enthusiastic about the position, your accomplishments, and what you know about the company. Be honest. Don't gush. If you're not genuinely enthusiastic, you'll come across as a phony. Make lots of eye contact. Have you ever known someone who wouldn't look you in the eye? After a while, you probably started to wonder what that person had to hide. You don't want the interviewer wondering anything of the sort. So meet his or her eyes while you're shaking hands, and then frequently throughout the interview. Don't stare so hard that he wonders if one of your hobbies is stalking. Constant eye contact is just as bad as none at all. Remain positive. In other words, steer away from negative words as much as possible. As we'll see when we discuss questions about your previous jobs, you must learn to put a positive spin on everything, especially loaded issues, such as your reason for leaving a job, troubled relations with your superiors, and so on. Here's a good exercise. Tape record your answers to some of the questions on this audio tape, then write them down. How many negatives did you find hidden in your speech? Scratch them out and replace them with positive words and phrases. Then practice each new answer. Don't let an unskilled interviewer trip you up. Your advanced preparation should give you the power to take control of the interview, allowing you to emphasize the many ways in which you would benefit that company. Ready to get started? First, let's tackle the killer question. So, tell me a little about yourself. This is really more of a request than a question, but these few words can put you on the spot in a way no question can. And if you're unprepared, it can stop you dead. But if you are prepared, this can be your golden opportunity to keep the ball rolling by showing 4 of the traits the interviewer, any interviewer, is just dying to see: intelligence, enthusiasm, confidence, and dependability. Okay, it's time to review the personal inventory you completed earlier. Study the items you've listed under these headings: my strongest skills, my greatest areas of knowledge, my greatest personality strengths, the things I do best, my key accomplishments. These topics will be the main ingredients of your opening statement. Be sure to make it short, about 250 to 350 words, and sweet, chock full of specifics. It should take you no more than a minute or two to cover the following information: a brief introduction, your key accomplishments, the key strengths demonstrated by these accomplishments, the importance of these strengths and accomplishments to your prospective employer, where and how you see yourself developing in the position for which you're applying, tempered with the right amount of modesty, of course. Let's dissect a couple of examples. Here's what Barb, a recent college graduate applying for an entry-level sales position, said. I've always been able to get along with different types of people. I think it's because I'm a good talker and an even better listener. Barb modestly introduces herself while immediately laying claim to the most important skills a good salesperson should have. During my senior year in high school, when I began thinking seriously about which careers I'd be best suited for, sales came to mind almost immediately. In high school and during my summer breaks from college, I worked various part-time jobs at retail outlets. She demonstrates industriousness and at least some related experience. Unlike most of my friends, I actually liked dealing with the public. Barb conveys enthusiasm for selling. However, I also realized that retail had its limitations, so I went on to read about other types of sales positions. I was particularly fascinated by what is usually described as consultative selling. I like the idea of going to a client you have really done your homework on and showing him how your products can help him solve one of his nagging problems, and then following through on that. She shows interest and enthusiasm for the scope of the job. After I wrote a term paper on consultative selling in my senior year of college, I started looking for companies at which I could learn and refine the skills shared by people who are working as account managers. Barb shows initiative both in researching the area of consultative selling to write a term paper and then in researching prospective companies. That led me to your company, Mr. Shannon. I find the prospect of working with companies to increase the energy efficiency of their installations exciting. I've also learned some things about your sales training programs. They sound like they're on the cutting edge. She gives evidence that she's an enthusiastic self-starter. I guess the only thing I find a little daunting about the prospect of working at Cogeneration Inc. is selling that highly technical equipment without a degree in engineering. By the way, what sort of support does your technical staff lend to the sales effort? Barb demonstrates that she's willing to learn what she doesn't know and closes by deferring to the interviewer's authority. By asking a question the interviewer must answer, Barb has also given herself a little breather. Now the conversational ball sits squarely in the interviewer's court. Not a bad little speech of a mere 253 words. Now let's look at one more example before I leave you with some pointers on how you can write an effective opening tailored to your personal inventory. With nearly a decade of experience in his field, Ken is applying for his dream job as a district general manager for a firm that provides maintenance services to commercial and residential properties. He knows he has a couple of strikes against him. First of all, he's already held 4 jobs, so he's moved around a bit. And he doesn't yet have the management experience required, virtually the equivalent of running a business with revenues of $7 million a year. But because he has anticipated what might otherwise have been a devastating first question, tell me something that will help me get a better feel for you than what I get from your resume. Ken is prepared with this winning counterpunch. I'm a hard worker who loves this business. I've been an asset to the employers I've had, and my experience would make me an even greater asset to you. I think these are the most exciting times that I've ever seen in this business. Sure, there's so much more competition now, and it's harder than ever to get really good help. But all the indications are that more and more companies will outsource their maintenance needs, and more two-income households will require the services that we provide. How do we get a bigger share of this business? How do we recruit and train the best personnel? Because they are, after all, the secret of our success. Those are the key challenges managers face in this industry. I can help your company meet those challenges. While resumes don't tell the whole story, mine demonstrates that I'm a hard worker. I've had promotions at every company I've worked for. I would bring a good perspective to the position because I've been a doer as well as a supervisor. The people who have worked for me have always respected my judgment because they know I have a very good understanding of what they do. And I have a terrific business sense. I'm great at controlling expenses. I deploy staff efficiently. I'm fair, and I have a knack for getting along with customers. I've always admired your company. I must admit, I've adopted some of Clean Shine's methods and applied them in the companies I've worked for. I see now that you're branching into lawn care. I worked for a landscaping business during my high school summers. How is that business going? Way to go, Ken. In a mere 278 words, this successful candidate has managed to first focus the interviewer only on the positive aspects of his resume. Sure, he has changed jobs, but after this answer, the interviewer is likely to think, gee, look at all he's managed to accomplish everywhere he's gone. Second, he got the interview started in the direction he wanted it to go. He demonstrated experience, leadership capabilities, and a good understanding of the market. Third, he introduced just the right amount of humility. Ken portrayed himself as a roll-up-the-sleeves kind of manager who will be at ease with blue-collar workers and with the suits back at headquarters. And last, he turned things back over to the interviewer with a very informed question. One of the most important things to note in Ken's reply is that he approached the interview knowing what he wanted to accomplish. He led the interviewer, point by point, to the conclusion he hoped to reach. It is essential for you to develop your own interview strategy, so your strengths can bob up to the surface and your weaknesses sink to the bottom. Or if they do surface, to give yourself the chance to make them seem relatively minor and unimportant. Here are some tips to get ready for that killer question. Complete your personal inventory. If you bypassed this step, do it now before we move on. Distill your personal inventory into a compelling opening. Use specifics to make this a short and sweet verbal picture of you. Frame yourself as an enthusiastic and competent professional, the ideal candidate for the job. Don't memorize it word for word. You want to sound fresh, not like you're reading from a set of internal cue cards. So know the content. Record yourself speaking it until it sounds sincere, but still spontaneous. Include strong, positive phrases and words. You want to convey enthusiasm and confidence, as well as knowledge and experience. What you don't know, you're eager to learn. Use it to set the course of the interview. Anticipate that the killer question will surface early, so be prepared to use it as an opportunity to steer the interview in the direction you want it to take. Fine-tune your response. Give a positive shine to any potential negatives, such as apparent job hopping and lack of related experience. End with the ball in the interviewer's court. By ending with a question, you get a much-deserved breather, while once again demonstrating your involvement and enthusiasm. Now that you're ready to survive the killer question, let's look at some of the other questions you're most likely to field. Why are you thinking about leaving your current job? Watch out for this one. It can be fatal. Obviously, no one wants to leave a job they're happy with. But the last thing you want to do is appear negative or worse, speak badly about your current employer. The less contented you are, the more careful you should be in talking about it. Try what management consultants call visioning. Imagine the ideal next step in your career. Then act as though you were interviewing for that position. Say you're interested in assuming more financial management responsibilities. You might tell the interviewer, "There is a great deal I enjoy about my current job, but my potential for growth in this area is limited because of the size of the company and the fact that expansion is not part of its current strategic plan." Bingo! Unless you've been fired or laid off, you should make it clear that you are sitting in front of the interviewer only because you seek more responsibility, a bigger challenge, better opportunities for growth, even more money, not because you are desperate to put some distance between yourself and your current job situation. Are you still employed at the last firm listed on your resume? You probably know the adage that it's always easier to find a job when you already have one. Well, it's still true. But the fact is, massive layoffs seem to be the order of the day. So there's no shame in this status. And if you were fired, come clean. But be quick to turn this potential negative into a positive. Let's consider the case of Nick. A hotel sales manager, he was unfortunate enough to work for a petty tyrant who made a practice of taking Nick and his co-workers to task often, publicly, and mercilessly. One day, Nick finally blew up at his boss and was fired on the spot. A few days later, he was asked about his employment status in an interview. He answered bluntly, "I was fired." When the stunned interviewer asked to hear more, Nick explained, "My boss and I just didn't get along, and I have to admit I didn't handle the situation very well. We have such vast differences in style. I'm someone with a lot of initiative who likes to be trusted to do a good job. Joe was a highly structured, very control-oriented manager who wanted the detail on every sales call in triplicate. I certainly understand the importance of call reports and other sales management controls. I guess I interpreted some of Joe's quick demands for these things as a lack of trust, and I shouldn't have. I learned my lesson." Even the most fair-minded of interviewers tends to look upon a firing or a layoff as a sign of weakness. So if you have a blemish on your record, Talk less about why you were terminated and more about what you've learned from the experience. And never dwell on the negative, such as what a rotten boss you had. If you were laid off, don't apologize. Say something like, yes, I was one of 16 people laid off when sales took a slide. This is an easy way out, presuming you were not a member of the sales department. Do you hop or flop? Companies are especially cautious about hiring people who have changed jobs repeatedly. Curiously enough, however, many are equally cautious of hiring people who have never moved. If either of these situations describes your particular job history, here's how to handle it. After being with the same organization for so long, don't you think you might have a tough time getting accustomed to another? Of course not. During your tenure with your current company, you've probably worked for more than one boss. You may even have supervised many different types of people in a number of departments. Certainly you've teamed up with a variety of coworkers. And from inside this one organization, you've had a chance to observe a wide variety of other organizations, competitors, vendors, customers, and so on. You're flexible and loyal. You should remind the interviewer that this can prove a valuable combination. You've changed jobs quite frequently. How do we know you'll stick around if we hire you? You've been with your current employer for only a short amount of time. Is this an indication that you'll be moving around a lot throughout your career? The hiring process is expensive for companies and time-consuming for managers. So convince the interviewer you have staying power by painting the position on offer as your career's promised land. Here's how. Confess that you had some difficulty defining your career goals at first, but now you're quite sure of your direction. Or convince the interviewer that you left previous positions only after you realized that moving on was the only way to increase your responsibilities and broaden your experience. Be sure to emphasize the fact that you would like nothing better than to stay and grow with one company. Sherry had 4 jobs in the first 6 years after her college graduation. Her clever reply to an interviewer's skepticism about her staying power combines both techniques. All through college, I was convinced that I wanted to be a programmer. But after a few months in my first job, I found that I was unhappy. Naturally, I blamed the company and the job. So when an opportunity opened up at Lakeside Bank, I grabbed it. But not long after the initial euphoria wore off, I was unhappy again. By this time, I'd noticed that I really did enjoy the part of my job that dealt with applications. So when I heard about the job in end-user computing at Safe Invest, I went for it. I learned a lot there until I hit a glass ceiling. It was a small firm, so there was no place for me to grow. I was recruited for the applications position at Deep Pockets Bank, and I got it because of some of the innovations I developed at SI. The work had been terrific, but once again, I find I'm a one-person department. This position offers the opportunity to manage a department and interact with programmers and specialists on the cutting edge of technology. Throughout my career, the one thing that has remained constant is my love of learning. This job would give me the chance to learn so much. Are you management material? If you're interviewing for a supervisory position, the interviewer will try to probe your potential in this area. Have you managed people in any of the positions you've held? It's best to answer yes. Candidates who have managed other people are considered more mature, whether or not their subordinates consider them good leaders. What's important is that they earned the confidence of their employers. Be sure to give the interviewer specific details on how many people you supervised and in what capacities they worked. And if you haven't actually had people reporting to you, talk about your experiences building consensus as part of self-managing teams. If they have convinced you that you have the right stuff to be a good manager, by all means say so. Have you been in charge of budgeting, approving expenses, and monitoring departmental progress against financial goals? Are you very qualified in this area? Again, financial responsibility signals an employer's faith in you. If you haven't had many or any fiscal duties, admit it. But as always, be creative in the way you frame your reply. For example, well, I've never actually run a department, but I've had to set and meet budgetary goals for several projects. In fact, I did this so often that I took a class to learn how to set up and use computer spreadsheets. If you've had broader responsibilities, talk about your approval authority. What is the largest amount you could sign off on? Let the interviewer know, in round numbers, the income and expenses of the departments you've supervised. Be careful. This question is also designed to trap you if you lied to the previous question. Managed 14 people but had no financial responsibilities at all? How long have you been looking for a job? Unless you've been fired or laid off, your answer should always be that you've just started looking. If the interviewer has some way of finding out that you've been looking for a while, then be prepared to answer, why haven't you received any offers so far? You're just as choosy about finding the right job as the interviewer is about hiring the right candidate. Don't whine or show that the search is upsetting you. If you've already fielded an offer or two, you might say, I've had an offer, but the situation was not right for me. I'm especially glad that I didn't accept, since I now have a shot at landing this position. It's important to tell the truth, however, because the interviewer's next logical question may be, who made you an offer, and for what type of position? If you've already lied, you're in hot water now. Many interviewers know a great deal about their competition and which positions they're trying to fill. If you did the smart thing and told the truth, give the interviewer the name of the company. It's very important to stress that the position you turned down was similar to the one you're applying for now. After all, if the job you're currently interviewing for is perfect for you, why would you be interested in something very different at the other company? Here are some other tips for answering questions about work. Be positive about your reasons for leaving your current job. The key word to remember is more. You want more responsibility, more challenges, more opportunity, and finally, but don't play this up, except as a natural consequence of the previous mores, more money. If you've been fired, stress what you learned from it, and be as positive as you can. Quantify the confidence other employers have placed in you. Do this by stressing specific facts, figures, and measurable accomplishments. Mention the number of employees you've supervised, the amount of money you controlled, the earnings that your department achieved under your management. Never speak badly of past supervisors or employers. It's the biggest negative of all. And you're highlighting nothing but the positive, right? Make the job you're interviewing for your chief objective. Frame your answers so that you let the interviewer know that you see this job as a means to achieving your ultimate career objectives. Be careful not to make it sound like either a stepping stone or a safe haven. Now that the quantitative data about your past jobs is out of the way, it's time to get down to the nitty-gritty. How did you do them? What makes you better than someone else with the same responsibilities and record? Screening interviewers and hiring managers will use information you volunteer about how you handled past triumphs and tribulations to draw conclusions about how you may handle tough situations you'll encounter on the job at hand. What are your strengths as an employee? Why should I consider you a strong applicant for the job? To prepare for these questions, pull out those data input sheets you labored over and write down the description of the position for which you're interviewing. Now, match your strengths and accomplishments directly to the requirements of the job. Say that you have a singular skill for meeting even the most unreasonable deadlines. You are tenacious. Nothing can stop you. This job may require a different sort of tenacity. You may have to coddle and cajole a wide variety of managers in several offices across the country to get input for the documents you produce, and then follow through by getting each and every one of them to sign off on the finished product. The interviewer may even admit that, frankly, deadlines often slip in this company. The important thing is that documents are universally approved. You need the perseverance to keep on plugging until that happens. If you go on at length solely about every down-to-the-wire deadline you met, you just talked yourself right out of that job. Are there any gaps in your qualifications? Probably a few, especially if you're reaching for the challenge at the next level of your career. So now it's time to dig in and deal with the hard questions that you know will be right on the tail of the previous ones. What are your biggest weaknesses as an employee, and what do you plan to do to correct them? What are the biggest failures you've had during your career, and what have you done to make sure they won't occur again? What are the skills you most need to develop to advance your career? And also, what do your supervisors tend to criticize most about your performance? How did you do on your last performance appraisal? What were the key strengths and weaknesses mentioned by your supervisor? Before you start to spill your guts, remember that the interviewer is not a priest, and this is not a confessional. In this situation, it would be ridiculous to produce a detailed log of your shortcomings and missteps. But it would be equally silly to pretend you're perfect and have never known failure during the course of your career, education, or life. So compromise. The best approach is to admit to one weakness or failure, make it a good one, and then talk about the steps you are taking, or have taken, to make sure that you'll never fail in quite that way again. What makes a weakness good? Choose any deficiency that might be considered a plus in a slightly different light. For example, you have a tendency to take on too much yourself. You're trying to solve this problem by delegating more. You're impatient with delays, so you're trying to better understand every step of the process a product must go through so you can anticipate holdups in the future. You've realized you're a workaholic, but you're doing your best to remedy your condition by reading books on time management. Try to think of a failure that took place relatively early in your career, and or one that would seem completely unrelated to the work you would be performing for your new employer. Don't ever admit to any personal quality that might hamper job performance, such as procrastination, laziness, or lack of concentration. Tell me about the best or worst boss you've ever had. Talk about a loaded question, but as a rule of thumb, most companies want to hear that you enjoyed working for someone who was interested in helping you learn and grow, involved in monitoring your progress, and generous about giving credit when it was due. I hope you've had the chance to work for someone like that. Now, what do you say about your worst boss? Don't get carried away with venomous accusations. They may serve only to introduce doubt about your own competence or your ability to get along with other people. For example, if you level the charge of favoritism, the interviewer might wonder why your boss liked other employees more than you. If you complain about a boss who was always looking over your shoulder, the interviewer might wonder whether it was because you couldn't be trusted to complete a task accurately or on time. Again, make sure to whitewash any negatives. Spend most of your time accentuating your positive accomplishments and qualities. If you say that your boss was stingy with his knowledge, you are accentuating your desire to learn. In the same vein, saying that a supervisor was uninvolved could indicate your desire to work within a cohesive team. Just prepare and practice your responses ahead of time. Looking back on it now, Do you think there was anything you could have done to improve your relationship with that one bad boss? Of course you do. The jobs or positions you've had since have shown you how to better accept criticism. Now that you have a better understanding of the pressures your supervisors are under, you can more successfully anticipate their needs. Use this opportunity to demonstrate your experience, perceptiveness, and maturity. How well do you fit in? In the world of business, style has little to do with how well you dress, although at some companies and in some positions, the right wardrobe may be a defining element of the culture. Typically, your business style is a measure of how you conduct yourself on the job. How well do you get along with superiors, subordinates, peers? What is your management philosophy? Do you like to work alone or be part of a team? Although they may try to be as objective as possible, many interviewers will base at least some of their hiring decisions on their feelings about your attitude and how well it is likely to fit within their organization. They may ask the following questions to find out whether you and the company are likely to have the right work-style chemistry. Are you an organized person? Even if you firmly believe that a neat desk is the sign of a sick mind, talk in detail about the organizational skills that you've developed. Time management, project management, needs assessment, delegation, and how those skills have made you more effective. But don't overdo it. No one wants to hire someone so anal retentive that he always knows the number of paper clips in his drawer. Do you manage your time well? I hope you can truthfully say yes, that you are a self-starter and almost never procrastinate. Good employees are able to set goals, prioritize their tasks, and devote adequate and appropriate amounts of time to each one. However, in answering a rather conceptual question like this, try to sprinkle in specifics. For example, I rarely miss a deadline. When circumstances beyond my control interfere, I make up the time lost as quickly as possible. I establish a to-do list first thing in the morning. Then I add to it and reprioritize tasks if necessary as the day goes on. How do you handle change? I hope you're able to say that you handle change quite well, thank you. Business is about change. In order to remain competitive, we have to adapt to changes in technology, personnel, leadership, business structure, the types of services we deliver, even the products we produce. Choose an example of change you faced that's resulted in something positive. Try to show that you not only accepted change and adapted to it, but flourished. For example, recently, my boss decided our company needed to develop a virtual storefront on the World Wide Web. I was given the task, along with a designer, of taking the project from research to operation in 8 weeks. I didn't have any special expertise in the area of online communications, so I have to assume I was given the task because I adapt well. We researched the subject, laid out the alternatives, and presented a plan that was accepted. Then I worked with the designer to present information in a medium neither of us had ever worked with before. In our second month online, sales were up 7% over the same time last year. How do you go about making important decisions? By now you have some sense of the culture of the company you're interested in working for, so shade your answer to match it. For example, if you want to work for a financial services company, you probably don't want to portray yourself as a manager who makes decisions based on gut feel. Similarly, if you're auditioning to be an air traffic controller, it's best not to admit that you like to sleep on things before making up your mind. Think in terms of the interviewer's main concerns. Will you need to be analytical, creative, willing to call on the expertise of others? If you are bucking for a management position, You'll also want to take this opportunity to convince the interviewer that your relationship skills have made you management material, or set you on the way to achieving that goal. You might say something like this: when I'm faced with an important decision, I ask the advice of others. I try to consider everything, but ultimately, I'm the one who decides. The higher you go in management, the more responsibility you have, and the more decisions you have to make by yourself. Do you work well under pressure? Virtually everyone will say yes to this question. However, be prepared to provide details that support your claims about being the second coming of Cool Hand Luke. Be sure to choose anecdotes that don't imply that the pressure you faced has resulted from your own procrastination or your own failure to anticipate problems. Do you anticipate problems well or merely react to them? All managers panic from time to time. The best learn to protect themselves by looking for problems that might lie just around the bend. For example, one sales manager I know had his staff provide reports on all positive and negative budget variances on a weekly basis. By sharing this valuable information with his boss and also with the manufacturing, distribution, and marketing arms of the company, he helped improve product turnover and boost flagging sales. This kind of story is terrific fodder for successful interviews. Would you describe yourself as a risk taker or someone who plays it safe? In most cases, the ideal candidate will be a little of both. Interviewers who ask this question are probing for innovation and creativity. But they also want to find out whether you might turn into a loose cannon who will ignore company policies and be all too ready to lead a fatal cavalry charge. If you could start your career all over again, what would you do differently? What's the biggest mistake you've ever made in choosing a job? Why? Unless you're shooting for a complete change of career, you must convince the interviewer that you wouldn't change a thing. You love your career and, given the chance, you'd do it all over again. Regrets? We've all had a few. In this case, however, watch which ones you mention, and make sure you position them in a way that shows what you've learned. Did you leave your first job because you were too impatient for a promotion, only to realize you hadn't learned everything you needed to? Did you miss the opportunity to specialize in some area or develop a particular skill that you should have? It certainly isn't advisable to admit, "I wish I had never gotten into magazine publishing in the first place." Better to reply, "My only regret is that I didn't go in this direction sooner. I started my career in editorial, and I enjoyed that. But once I got into marketing, I found I really loved it." Do you prefer to work with others or by yourself? How do you get along with superiors? How do you get along with coworkers? How do you get along with the people you've supervised? Again, the position you're interviewing for will dictate how you should shape your answers. For example, if you're interviewing for a job as an on-the-road sales rep, you won't want to say that you thrive on your relationships with coworkers and can't imagine working without a lot of interaction. Even if you do like the interaction at work, don't try to paint your environment as a bed of roses without any thorns. Every job situation forces us to get along with people we might not choose to even socialize with. Acknowledging this shows strength. Talk about how you've managed to get along with a wide variety of other people. Here are some tips for handling questions about work. Be honest, but again, play up your strengths and whitewash your weaknesses. If you have to talk about negative situations, point out what you learned from them and why you won't make the same mistakes again. Introduce only the positive. Don't give away information that could come back to haunt you. Strike a balance between portraying yourself as a company man or woman and a loose cannon. Screening interviewers and hiring managers are often attracted to risk takers, but they also put a lot of stock in playing by the rules. Your company research should clarify which road to take. If in doubt, choose neither. Go for the balance. Use specific work situations to illustrate your points. If you sense the interview drifting into the realm of the subjective evaluation, bring the interviewer back by using concrete examples from your past experience. Don't just say you're organized. Tell how you organized a complex project from beginning to end. Remember, insofar as possible, you want the interviewer basing his or her decision on the facts, your strengths, qualifications, and accomplishments, not some objective evaluation of chemistry. Choose your words carefully. Make sure that you are indeed answering questions and not suggesting other areas the interviewer hadn't thought to ask about. For example, I suggest, "I'm looking for greater challenges," rather than, "The boss didn't give me enough to do." Do you really want to travel down that road? Now it's time to talk, in detail, about your current job. In most prize fights, the first couple of rounds are relatively boring. The contestants try to get a sense for each other's feints and jabs before the serious pummeling begins. The same could be said of most interviews. After the first bell, the pleasantries begin. The second bell signals the getting to know you round of questioning. Then, if the interviewer thinks it's worthwhile, he begins pummeling you with questions meant to separate the stiffs from the real contenders. You've got to be ready to come out swinging. What were your most memorable accomplishments in your last job? Of your career? Focus on your most recent accomplishments, but make sure they are relevant to the position for which you're interviewing. It's also wise to think about why you were able to achieve these peaks in your career. For example, I really stopped to listen to what my customers wanted, rather than just trying to sell them. This type of response tells the interviewer you give a great deal of thought to how you will reach your goals, rather than blindly plunging ahead in their general direction. By letting the interviewer know that you regularly assess your shortcomings, you show that you are better able to find the means to overcome them. Remember, most employers are looking for problem solvers. A savvy interviewer may ask this question after you've described your reasons for leaving your current job. Was there anything your company or department could have done to be more successful? Did you inaugurate any new procedures or systems or policies in any of the positions you've held? Of course, you had some very good solutions you'd be happy to share with the interviewer. Regrettably, however, some or none could be implemented because of circumstances beyond your control. This is the time to bring up those facts and figures we talked about earlier. Describe the changes or improvements you were responsible for making, and identify how they helped the company in terms of increased profits, cost savings, or improved production. Here's a perfectly acceptable answer. Sure, we could have expanded our product line, perhaps even doubled it, to take advantage of our superior distribution, but we just didn't have the capital and couldn't get the financing. Describe the way your department is organized. Also, what is the title of the person you report to, and what are his or her responsibilities? Aha! Gotcha! If you've been exaggerating the responsibilities of your position, you're about to become very uncomfortable. To prevent this embarrassing moment, don't portray your job as so big that there couldn't be anything left for your boss to do. Is desperation driving you away from your current job? This doesn't make you a prime candidate to most interviewers, so be sure you are the picture of composure and control, whatever your situation. If you don't leave your current job, what do you think will happen to you in your career? How far do you expect to advance with your current company? Remember the adage, there's no better time to look for a new job than when you're happy with your old job. Even if you'd rather hawk peanuts at the stadium, convince the interviewer that you're the type of employee who is capable of making the most of any situation, even an employment situation you've just said you want to leave. Begin your answers with the phrase, well, assuming I'm not the successful candidate for this position. Without too much ego, let the interviewer know that you're taking your time. You're interested in choosing a job that's right for you. While it's a good idea to convince your prospective employer that the world is your oyster and you're simply waiting to find the perfect pearl of a job, you might get hit with questions like these. If you're so happy at your current firm, why are you looking for another job? Will your company be surprised that you're leaving? You might think your current company will go out of business at any second, or you may be leaving because you just broke off your engagement with the person in the office next door. Don't cry on the interviewer's shoulder. Instead, reassure him or her that you're not running away from anything. You've made the decision to move toward more responsibility, more knowledge, and, of course, the wonderful opportunity available at Good Times, Inc. If you have these complaints about your present company, and they think so highly of you, why haven't you brought your concerns to their attention? If you find yourself cornered, the only way out is to be as positive as possible. Say something like, Grin and Barrett is aware of my desire to move up, but the company is still small. There's not really much they can do about it. The management team is terrific. There's no need right now to add to it, and they are aware of some of the problems this creates in keeping good performers. It's something they talk about quite openly. Here are some more tips for interview success. Shape your answers to the position. Learn as much as you can about the position for which you're interviewing before you get to the interview. When you talk about your own accomplishments, skills, and qualifications, talk in terms of the requirements of that job and the goals of that company. Always think in terms of what and why. As you talk about your successes or failures, stress the positive lessons you've learned, those that you've already applied or plan to apply in your next position. Don't exaggerate. Your accomplishments and responsibilities should speak for themselves. If you felt you lacked opportunities to make a mark in the past, say so. If you bend the truth, there are too many ways a savvy interviewer can find you out. Don't learn the hard way. It will probably cost you the job. Don't appear desperate, even if you've been terminated from your previous job. But don't come across as smug either. Concentrate on showing your genuine interest and enthusiasm for the opportunities offered, such as more responsibility, more knowledge, and more money. Avoid the negative. You want the interviewer to associate as few negative words or feelings with you as possible. Make the best of your current position. Let the interviewer know you may still be able to find some of the things you're looking for in your current position. You want to convey the impression that you are a positive worker who tries to make the best of any situation. And again, you're trying not to appear too desperate. Some interviewers will equate desperate with cheap to hire. Build a vocabulary of action words. A great list is enclosed with this package. If you use them consistently in your resume, interviews, and follow-up letters, they should leave a lasting impression in the interviewer's mind. Take a few moments to review these words each day. In very little time, they'll find their way into your everyday speaking and writing. Now we come to the classic good news, bad news scenario. First, the good news. If you've made it to this point, the interviewer probably likes you. Most screening interviewers and hiring managers weed out the candidates who don't stand a chance long before they get to the questions that follow. Now the bad news. The interviewer will continue grilling you until the facade you've been bravely holding up finally starts to crumble. Here goes. What interests you most about this position? About our company? You know the drill by now. You have your eye on more responsibility, more opportunities, the chance to supervise more people, and the chance to develop a new set of skills and sharpen the ones you've already acquired. However, this is also the ideal time to show what you know about this company and how the position you're interviewing for can contribute to its success. You'll have to do some homework to get the answer to these questions. What are the company's leading products? What products is it planning to introduce in the near future? What are the company's key markets? Are they growing? Are they changing? What is the company's share of each of its markets? Which other companies serving those markets pose a serious threat? What are the company's plans and prospects for growth and expansion? Armed with this knowledge, you might reply, I've heard so much about your titanium ball bearings that I've wanted to experiment with different applications for them. Doing some preliminary research also will give you a leg up should the interviewer ask, what have you heard about our company that you don't like? This is tricky, so settle for a response that doesn't relate directly to the job you're after. Maybe you've heard that ABC Widget had a layoff 12 months ago, and you're wondering if the dust has settled yet. Or perhaps you've heard rumors of a merger. Don't play dumb. If the interviewer opens the door for you to ask what might otherwise be uncomfortable questions, by all means, walk right in. This is a much larger or much smaller company than you've ever worked for. How do you feel about that? If the company is larger, you are undoubtedly looking forward to terrific growth opportunities and exposure to more areas of knowledge than you've had access to. If the company is smaller, you're looking forward to a far less bureaucratic organization, where decisions can be made much more quickly. What are you looking for in your next job? Interviewers typically ask a question like this to gauge your level of interest in the job and see if you have any doubts. So focus on the job at hand. Think of key skills the job requires and emphasize your interest in having a chance to further develop one of them. And don't forget to express enthusiasm for your field of work. What aspect of the job I've described appeals to you the least? Shoot this question right back at the interviewer. For example, you might say, you've described a position in which I'd be overseeing some extraordinary levels of output. What sort of quality control procedures does this company have? Will I be able to consult with in-house specialists? Based on what you know about our industry right now, how does your ideal job stack up against the description of the job you're applying for? The ideal job is always one in which you'll have a broad scope of responsibilities that will enable you to continue to learn about your industry and grow. So use your knowledge about the industry to formulate a reply that, though perhaps a bit idealistic, doesn't sound unrealistic. And based on what you know about the position, touch on one, and only one, minor shortcoming, and formulate a few careful questions about some aspects of the position you don't know about. You might say, I know this position is in the auditing area, and that you hire many of your entry-level people into that department. I must confess, I would like this to be a stepping stone to working more in the manufacturing area, and several years down the line in consulting. I'm sure I don't have the requisite knowledge or skills yet. Is this a position in which I can gain them? And is this a career track that's possible at this firm? What do you feel an employer owes an employee? This is not your invitation to discuss the employee benefits package you would like to have. It's a loaded question, especially in this era of corporate downsizings. Don't get into a dissertation on the employer's moral responsibility to employees. For that matter, don't get into legal responsibilities. Try to refocus the interviewer's attention on your positive outlook and keep your answers short and sweet. I think an employer owes its employees opportunity. In my next position, I look forward to the opportunity to run projects profitably. If the interviewer digs for a more specific response about a sensitive issue, such as your feeling about the information an employer should share with employees, or the size of the raise pool, you could respond like this. I hope that my employer will be respectful of me and of any agreements we may negotiate in the course of business. However, I know that there are times when organizations face tough decisions that may require confidentiality and affect employees. That's business. What types of people do you find it most difficult to get along with? Be careful. You might say, pushy, abrasive people, only to find out the interviewer is known for being brusque. One candidate I interviewed gave me a good answer to this question. My boss told me I'm too impatient with slow performers. He told me the world is filled with C rather than A or B people, and I expect them all to be great performers. So I guess I do have trouble with mediocre and poor workers. I don't expect to ever accept poor work, but I'm learning to be more patient. Are there any people who have trouble getting along with you? If you say no, the interviewer will assume you're being evasive. I suggest thinking of an anecdote that softens, perhaps with humor, the reasons someone disliked you. A colleague of mine remembered back to his first job. Eager to succeed, he hit the ground running. From day one, he worked twice as hard and twice as fast as his long-term peers, who, needless to say, resented him for it. His answer was ready-made. If you've ever been a manager, you've probably hired and fired people. But even if you haven't, here are some suggestions for responding to the following questions. Have you ever hired anyone? Why did you choose him or her, or them? If you have, your answer might go something like this. Yes, I have hired people. The first time, I concentrated on checking off all the right qualifications. I just went down a checklist. Since then, though, I've learned that some candidates who became great workers didn't necessarily have every qualification on that checklist. They more than made up for what they lacked in the beginning with enthusiasm and a willingness to work with others. What if you've never hired anyone? You might try this tack. Not really, but on several occasions, I was asked to speak to potential hires. I was trying to determine whether that person would be a team player and would get along with other people in the department. Have you ever fired anyone? Why? Even if you had good reason, you know that firing someone is never pleasant. Say so, and provide a sanitized and brief version of the event. Let's say you fired someone for not meeting productivity goals. You might say something like this. Yes, I fired someone who continually fell short of his productivity goals. His shortcomings were documented and discussed with him over a period of months, but he failed to show any real improvement. As a supervisor, I want everyone in my department to work out. Let's face it, though, not everyone is equally dedicated to his or her job. If you haven't actually fired anyone, here's one way to respond. I've never fired anyone myself, but I was asked on 2 occasions to give my opinion about someone else's performance. It's never easy to be honest about a coworker's shortcomings, but I felt I had to do what was best for the department and fair to everyone else in it. What does the word success mean to you? Answer this question from a personal as well as a professional perspective. If your successes come only through your job, the interviewer might begin to see you is little more than a robot. However, if you go on and on about personal goals, you'll seem uncommitted to working for success on the job. So strike a balance. You might talk about success in these terms. I've always enjoyed supervising a design team. In fact, I've discovered that I'm better at working with other designers than designing everything myself. Unlike a lot of people in my field, I'm also able to relate to the requirements of the manufacturing department. So I guess I'd say success means working with others to come up with efficient designs that can be up on the assembly line quickly. Of course, the financial rewards of managing a department give me the means to travel during my vacations. That's the thing I love most in my personal life. What does the word failure mean to you? It's better to cite something specific to demonstrate what you mean by failure. Otherwise, you might get into a lengthy philosophical discussion more suited to a Bergman film than an interview. Here's a good answer. Failure is not getting the job done when I have the means to do so. For example, once I was faced with a huge project. I should have realized at the outset that I didn't have the time. I also didn't have the knowledge I needed to do it correctly. Instead of asking for help, I blundered through. That won't ever happen to me again if I can help it. Here's one that makes everybody cringe. What do you want to be doing 5 years from now? What are your most important long-term goals? Of course, you want a position of responsibility in your field, but you don't want to appear overly ambitious. So start humbly. Ultimately, that will depend on my performance and on the opportunities offered by my employer. Then toot your own horn a little bit. I've already demonstrated leadership characteristics in all of the jobs I've held, so I feel confident that I will take on progressively greater management responsibilities in the future. No matter what, please don't answer, "I'd like your job." Interviewers tired of that answer long before I was born. Have you recently established any new objectives or goals? This question provides you with an opportunity to demonstrate how your goals and motivations have changed as you've matured and gained valuable on-the-job skills. If you've recently become a manager, talk about how that promotion has affected your career outlook for the future. If you've realized that you must sharpen a particular skill to continue growing, mention that. Are you a dictator or a pushover? Interviewers want to be sure that, as a manager, you'll be neither. How would you describe your management philosophy? You want to demonstrate a desire and ability to delegate, teach, and distribute work and credit fairly. Give an answer that conveys both authority and experience, such as, "More than anything else, I think that management is getting things done through other people." The manager's job is to provide the resources and environment in which people can work effectively. I try to do this by creating teams, judging people solely on the basis of their performance, distributing work fairly, and empowering workers as much as possible to make their own decisions. I've found that this breeds loyalty and inspires hard work. Here are some tips for convincing the interviewer you're a good catch. Do your homework. Find out as much as you can about the company and how the position for which you're interviewing contributes to its goals. Demonstrate experience and exude confidence. Give the interviewer strong answers using concrete cases that are relevant to the position you're after. Be humble. Convey the impression that you have the ability to succeed. But avoid giving the impression that you're a fire-breathing workaholic, ready to succeed no matter what or who the cost. Appear firm, but not dictatorial, when you talk about your management philosophy. Let the interviewer know that you are able to delegate and still keep track of each person's progress. Talk about growth. Tell the interviewer how you've grown in each of the jobs you've held, and how your career goals have changed as a result. Admit to your failures. Concentrate on what you learned from past failures, discussing how you've changed as a result. Showcase your successes. Make sure to position yourself as a professional with a satisfying personal life. Now, let's get personal. Most people think that the candidate who talks only about work stands the best chance of getting the job. But there's a you that's alive after 5 p.m., and most interviewers want to get to know that person too. The guiding principle for answering personal questions is the same as it is for responding to queries about your professional life. Accentuate the positive. Let the interviewer in on the best and most interesting aspects of your personality. Just be careful of saying too much. Your answers can reveal more information than the interviewer is entitled to by law. For instance, you might feel comfortable talking about your children and the challenges of being a single parent. The interviewer could not have asked about your family situation in order to eliminate you from the running. Yet once this information is out, it's fair game. He or she is free to use it to make unfair judgments about your ability to handle various aspects of the job. If the job you're applying for involves occasional overnight travel, for instance, he or she may decide your family situation would create unnecessary difficulties. So while these questions do give you an opportunity to demonstrate what a terrific person you are, they could also prompt you, unwittingly, to provide information that dooms your chances for employment. Are you in good health? What do you do to stay in shape? You must be honest answering these. Prospective employers can find ways to check your medical history if they're worried about your health. In fact, many employers make job offers contingent on your passing a company physical. If you appear to be dedicated to maintaining your own good health, you'll ease many of their concerns. You don't have to be a fitness nut. Just play up any daily activities that provide at least some health benefit, such as yard work, home repairs, even walking the dog. Do you have any physical problems that may limit your ability to perform this job? This is a perfectly legitimate question, so be honest. Are you applying for a job that requires a lot of data entry, despite the fact that you've been waging an ongoing battle with carpal tunnel syndrome? Are you going to be doing a lot more walking and standing on the job that might trigger that problem knee? Remember, though, the keywords are ability to perform this job. A physical problem that is not job-related is not pertinent, and none of the employer's business, by law. Many employers subscribe to the theory, if you want something done, give it to a busy person. So you want to portray yourself as an active, vital individual. What do you like to do when you're not at work? My advice is to talk about both active and passive activities, and be sure to emphasize those that may complement your on-the-job duties. For instance, if you're applying for a position as a bookstore manager, mentioning that you read 3 books a week is very appropriate. Your addiction to helicopter skiing probably isn't, for any job. Shy away from the controversial, and don't brag about interests that could cause a squeamish employer to envision a prolonged sick leave. It's usually safe to talk about most sports activities, but avoid emphasizing those that are likely to spark concern or controversy, such as skydiving or hunting. As a rule, employers like activities that show you are community-minded and people-oriented. Your involvement with the Chamber of Commerce, Toastmasters, the Rotary Club, or fundraising for charities is likely to earn points. But I'd suggest fighting the urge to mention any religious or political activities that may alienate the interviewer. In short, be sure you don't sound like a couch potato, mention so many activities you could seem headed for a collapse, boast about dangerous activities, or bring up controversial interests that may be personally objectionable to the interviewer. As you relax in the spell of a skilled interviewer, your guard will come down. So don't be surprised if you field more questions like these. How would your coworkers describe you? Once again, the personal inventory you completed will come in handy. Take words from the lists you've entitled, My Strongest Skills, My Greatest Areas of Knowledge, My Greatest Personality Strengths, and the Things I Do Best, and put them in the mouths of coworkers and friends. How do you generally handle conflict? I hope that you can honestly answer in this way. I really don't get angry with other people very often. I'm usually able to work things out or anticipate problems before they occur. When conflicts can't be avoided, I don't back down, but I try to be reasonable. How do you behave when you're having a problem with a coworker? Now it's time to relate a specific incident and talk about what you learned from it. Here's one answer. I had to work with a designer who would answer me in monosyllables and then drag his feet before doing anything I asked. Finally, I said, "Look, we're both professionals. Neither of us has the right answer all the time. I notice that you don't really like my suggestions, but rather than resisting implementing them, why don't we just discuss what you don't like?" That worked like a charm. In fact, we even became friends. If you could change one thing about your personality with a snap of your fingers, what would it be? Why? Choose a trait you've listed as a weakness that you don't allow to get in the way of your work. You might say, I had a hard time with procrastination in college, but I licked it because burning the midnight oil all through finals was driving me nuts. I have to confess, I still have the urge to put things off. You might smile disingenuously here. I wish that I never felt like delaying, but I know now what will happen if I do. Describe your best friend and what he or she does for a living. In what ways are you similar or dissimilar from your best friend? Don't let your guard down for this seemingly benign question. Interviewers typically ask a question like this on the theory that best friends are very much alike. Take pains to describe a person that the company would find easy to hire, not someone any sane person would cross the street to avoid. Here are some tips for tooting your own horn without becoming a blowhard. Don't get carried away. Only the most annoying people don't find it difficult to talk about themselves in a flattering way. And that's what you'll be doing, until even you will want to change the tune. You'll be saying what a great person your friends think you are, what a pleasure your supervisors thought it was to have you on their team, and that there are only a few little adjustments you'd like to make to your personality. Stress the traits companies are looking for: enthusiasm, confidence, energy, dependability, and honesty. Formulate answers that suggest these characteristics. Think about what you would want in an employee if you owned a company. Wouldn't you want a problem solver? A team player? Someone who is enthusiastic about working hard to achieve goals? Be creative. A friend of mine had to work his way through college. He pumped gas and stocked grocery shelves during the summer. These menial positions were in no way related to publishing, a very internship-oriented field. So he was ready with this response at his first magazine company interview. I wish I'd had more time to write for the school paper. Whenever I wasn't studying, I pretty much had to work to pay for college. But I learned a number of things from the jobs I held, lessons most people learn only after they've been in their careers for a while, such as how to work with other people and how to manage my time effectively. See what I mean? Now it's time to go on to the twilight zone of the interview. You're about to enter the realm of the hypothetical. Through your answers to hypothetical questions, you'll be measured by how well you perform before you step into the job. Do you have the resourcefulness, logic, creativity, and ability to think under pressure? The interviewer hopes to find out by subjecting you to the situational interview. Say your supervisor left an assignment in your inbox, then left town for a week. You can't reach him, and you don't fully understand the assignment. What would you do? The interviewer is most likely looking to see whether you have an appropriate respect for hierarchy and deadline demands. If there is truly no way to reach your boss, you'd suck up the courage to approach your boss's supervisor. Of course, you'd do this in a way that would not reflect badly on your boss, pointing out that you and your boss simply missed the chance to discuss the assignment before he had to leave the office. Because you're not yet familiar with the company's procedures, you just wanted to be sure that you understood the assignment so you can jump on it right away. The successful candidate for this position will be working with some highly trained individuals who have been with the company for a long time. How will you fit in with them? Your answer should indicate your eagerness to learn from your future co-workers. You don't want to raise any doubts about how they might react to you. So convey the fact that while you are certainly bringing something to the party, skills, knowledge, your own insights, you realize you have a lot to learn from the people you'll be working with. Your supervisor tells you to do something in a way you know is dead wrong. What would you do? This is a tough question, so why not acknowledge it with an answer like this? In a situation like this, even the best employee runs the risk of seeming rebellious. I would pose my alternative to my supervisor in the most deferential way possible. If he insisted that I was wrong, I guess I'd have to do it his way. If you were unfairly criticized by your supervisor, what would you do? All of us can think back to a time when the pressure was on and a mistake was made. Maybe you took more than your fair share of the blame. Perhaps you were caught in circumstances beyond your control. In any event, your boss blamed you. But chances are you and your boss got through the rough spot, and you made sure the mistake never occurred again. You could answer the question by telling of such an occurrence. You do not have to select the most vulnerable or perilous moment of your career to illustrate the point. Simple mistakes are more than adequate. Would you like to have your boss's job? Why or why not? No matter how you answer this question, the interviewer will learn a lot about you, so proceed with caution. It's an indirect way of finding out whether or not you want to be promoted. Let's start with the first part of the question. Saying yes indicates you're ambitious and interested in career advancement. Saying no indicates doubts or reservations, at least about the job in question. In the second part of the question, things get stickier. For instance, if it's clear that you're interested in promotion, and the position you're applying for doesn't offer a path to a higher level, then the interviewer may conclude that you'll be disappointed. On the other hand, in a highly competitive organization, revealing reservations about career advancement could knock you out of the running immediately. There are two things you should do to prepare for this question. First, in your preliminary research, get a sense of the corporate culture and the opportunities for advancement. Try to be aware of the possibilities going into the interview. Second, know what your honest answer to the question is. Maybe you are ready to move up and take on your boss's job. Or maybe you shudder at the thought of a management job. Know thyself on this one, because if you're hired, your answer may well come back to haunt you. Ideally, your honest answer will suit the company. If your aspirations are completely at odds with the possibilities, you can, at your own risk, compensate by offering an answer that fits. No matter what, make it positive. How will you handle the least interesting or least glamorous parts of your job? An interviewer posing this question usually will build in specific aspects of the position, such as, you won't always be looking for creative solutions to our clients' tax problems. Most of the time, you'll be churning out returns and making sure you comply with the latest laws. You're aware of that, of course. You might answer, I'm sure that every job in the accounting field has its routine tasks. They have to be done too. Doing them is part of the satisfaction of doing the job well. They make the infrequent chances we have to be creative even more satisfying. You've had little experience with budgeting, or sales, or marketing, or whatever. How do you intend to learn what you need to know to perform well in this job? Well, throughout my career, I've proven to be a quick study. For instance, when my company's inventory system was computerized, I didn't have the time to go through the training, but the company that supplied the software had developed some computer-based tutorials and training manuals. I studied them and practiced at home. I hoped that I'd be able to do something similar to pick up the basics of your budgeting system. You could also mention other options, such as learning from professional publications and seminars. Show your initiative and resourcefulness in getting up to speed quickly. The interviewer wants to be sure you won't just be sitting around twiddling your thumbs and complaining that you just don't know what to do next. Reassure him or her that you plan to do whatever it takes to go right on learning, month after month, year after year. Here's how to shine in any situational interview. Admit that a tough situation would make you nervous. You might even panic momentarily. No interviewer is looking for a candidate bent on plunging right in and then flailing about without thinking of the consequences or alternatives. Nervousness produces the adrenaline that often fuels creative strategies. Take a moment to think before you answer. This shows that you are not likely to dive into any situation with a hot-headed response. Rather, you're taking the time to weigh the alternatives and choose the best course of action. Avoid throwing the bull. No matter what the interview technique, resist any temptation to overstate or even downright lie. Show that you have a grasp of the real world. Admit that you have a lot to learn about this company and the position. This approach is far more effective than trying to sell yourself as a savior. Plan your answers to a number of situations ahead of time. Assume that some of these questions will be about areas of knowledge and skill you have yet to develop. So learn as much as you can about what you don't know. and have a strategy for finding the information or resources you currently lack. It's still true. The more work experience you have, the less anyone will care about what you did in college. Interviewers tend to care most about real-world, on-the-job problems and solutions. But if you're fresh out of college or still consider yourself a recent graduate, then the following questions are directed to you. This section is designed to guide the relatively inexperienced candidate facing that age-old catch-22. You need training to get the job, but how can you get that seasoning if you can't get a job? You want to portray yourself as a well-rounded person while you are in college. If you weren't a member of many official school clubs or teams, talk about other activities you engaged in during school. Did you work part-time? Tutor other students? Work for additional course credit? What extracurricular activities were you involved in? What made you choose those? Which of them did you most enjoy, and why? Interviewers are looking for industrious people, not individuals who do just enough to eke by. So this isn't a good place to joke, "Well, John, I didn't do much but drink beer on weekends," especially if it's true. In fact, there probably is never a good time to joke during an interview. After all, one person's innocent joke is another's reason, unfair or not, to reject a candidate. What led you to select your major, your minor? Which of the courses did you like most or least? If you were a liberal arts major, talk about the skills you developed in some of your courses: writing ability, debating and language skills, analytical tools. Assuming that you took courses related to the job at hand, focus only on those that are pertinent. Those courses you mention as your least favorite should be any that are not directly related to your eventual career. Try to develop answers that have to do with the subject rather than the workload or the professor's personality. Talking about troubles with an authority figure will introduce a possible negative into your current candidacy. And complaining about too much work is not the best way to impress any prospective boss, especially these days when staff cutbacks mean you'll probably be called upon to handle more work than your predecessors, with less money, less time, and less help. If you were to start college over again tomorrow, what are the courses you would take? Why? Think about changes you would make in your course selections that would have produced a better candidate for this job. Should you have taken more marketing courses? An accounting course? An economics seminar? Don't be afraid to admit that it took you a while to find the right course of study. Then talk about how courses unrelated to your career were valuable in your development. No company really believes that you're going to hit the ground running right out of college or graduate school. Training and on-the-job seasoning will be necessary to make you productive. So you can count on an interviewer doing a bit of probing, trying to determine how trainable you are. What did you learn from the internships listed on your resume? Stress how the real-world internships you've had complemented your academic training, but never pretend that college is where you learned the secret of life. No interviewer is going to react favorably to someone who acts like he or she already knows it all. In what courses did you get your worst grades? Why? How do you think that will affect your performance on the job? Many companies will ask to see copies of your college transcripts if you don't have any real work background, so you might as well spill the beans now. If you flunked every accounting course, you're probably not applying for an accounting job, right? So, hopefully, you can blame any bad grades you may have received in some of your electives on the amount of time and effort you are putting into your major. Especially when you're young, changes in direction are common. Changes are hard enough to live through without getting grilled about them. But when the interviewer asks about one of your 180-degree turns, you've got to respond. Why are you applying for a job in a field, or working in a field, other than the one in which you have your degree? If you're applying for a retail management position and your degree is in geology, there's a good chance you'll be asked this question. But count on it, it's not the first time this employer has encountered someone like you. In today's job market, changing careers is common, and there's nothing unique about going into a field different than the one you majored in. So what do? You know you've piqued the employer's interest enough to get an interview, so relax and answer the question. Keep it brief and positive. You've reassessed your career goals. You enjoy customer contact, the competitive nature of sales, and the varied management responsibilities required in retail. You've decided it's the career you want to pursue. Then it may be a good idea to pause and ask, have I answered your question? Give the interviewer an opportunity to state concerns about your qualifications. If he or she does so, be prepared to show how the skills required in your degree field transfer to the field in which you're seeking employment. You can use the same strategy with your prior work experience. Here are some tips for recent college grads. Don't be afraid to say you will need help. And when you do need help, make sure that the interviewer knows you'll ask for it. Not many companies are looking for, or expect to find, a 22-year-old know-it-all. If you are a 22-year-old know-it-all, keep it to yourself. Admit that you don't have all the answers, or begin a lot of your answers with, I think, or from what I know about the industry. Don't appear squeamish at the idea of going through the school of hard knocks. Many baby boomers think that baby busters, you and your friends, have some real attitude problems. Tell the interviewer, I know this position has its share of unpleasant duties, but I'm sure everyone who had this job before me has learned a lot by doing them. There are interviewers out there who go out of their way to describe in painful detail the worst or most boring aspects of the job. Don't be fooled into showing any negative reaction, even a raised eyebrow, when garbage detail is being discussed. If it took a while for you to find your direction, admit it. Nobody has all the answers at 18 or 19. How many people know from the start that they wanted to be accountants or nurses? Most interviewers will not be surprised that you changed majors as an undergraduate. Show how your other studies contribute to making you the best candidate. Don't answer any question about who paid the costs of your schooling, or about any outstanding educational loans you may be carrying. Go ahead and play up the fact that you received a complete academic scholarship, or were industrious enough to work your way through school if you want to. But by law, you don't have to say any more. There are no innocent questions. I'll never forget this story a friend told me. As the head of recruiting for a rather large company, he spent weeks at a time interviewing scores of candidates for a wide variety of openings. With so much practice, he became very good at identifying unsuitable candidates in minutes and releasing the unsuspecting person with a simple, "Thanks for stopping by," before the interview even got underway. Here's how it worked. On greeting a young woman applicant for a sales position one morning, my friend asked, "How are you?" The applicant immediately began whining about the fact that it was raining, and besides, she had a run in her stocking. This was a cue to my friend. He turned to her and, feigning embarrassment, said, "Oh, Are you here to apply for that sales position? I'm sorry, we forgot to call. We filled it yesterday. But we'll keep you in mind for any other sales openings that come along. Thanks for stopping by. This story demonstrates an interview truism that few candidates realize. There is no such thing as an innocent question. You are being judged from the moment the interviewer sees you or hears you on the telephone until the offer of employment is made. There are many seemingly innocent questions that can completely doom your chances very quickly. Here are just a few. How are you today? Did you have any trouble finding us? You're doing just fine, thank you, and no, you didn't have any trouble at all. That's because, don't admit this, just do it, you took the time to get directions from the interviewer's assistant. Again, it all comes down to being positive. I'm not suggesting that you plaster an idiot grin on your face and go on like some Stepford employee. But I do urge you to make every effort not to let anything negative, even the crummy weather, enter into any part of your interaction with the interviewer. Do you know much about our company? Believe it or not, many candidates think this is merely an icebreaker and simply answer, nope, not really. Don't you follow suit. After all, why would you ever go into one of the most important encounters of your life so thoroughly unprepared? And then admit it. I have urged, nagged, that you do your homework. This is where your research will come in handy. Toss out a few salient and positive facts about the company, and finish by lobbing a question back into the interviewer's court. For instance, boy, what a growth story Starter Up is. Didn't I recently read that you've had 7 straight years of double-digit growth? I read in your annual report that you're planning to introduce a new line of products in the near future. I jumped at the chance to apply here. Can you tell me a little about this division and the position you're interviewing for? Over the years, I've taken to asking some out-of-the-blue questions of job candidates. And according to what I read in human resources journals, I'm not at all out of the ordinary. Many interviewers will try to lure you away from these standard interview questions. By now, many of these questions have become cliches. You've memorized the correct answers to each one, just as if you copped a stolen exam. The real test is in how you answer those questions that hail from somewhere west of left field. What's the last book you read? No doubt advertisers ask this question of celebrities in those glossy profiles for doers for the same reason an interviewer will ask the question of you. Because what someone chooses to read speaks volumes about what kind of person he or she is. But before you spew out last month's reading list, consider this. Right or wrong, many interviewers seem to think that people who read nonfiction are more interested in the world about them than fiction readers, who they may believe are looking for an escape. So rather than talk about the latest thriller you couldn't put down, opt for a popular how-to book. This will demonstrate that you're interested in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, or the Discipline of Market Leaders, or just trying to improve your knowledge and skill as a business person. What's the last movie you saw? Mention a popular but non-controversial movie. It won't do you a bit of good to gleefully admit it was Friday the 13th, Part 86. Do you want your taste in foreign films or left-wing documentaries to stand between you and a job? It's much better to stay with a Tom Hanks movie like Forrest Gump. If you insist your preferences shouldn't matter, feel free to discuss your ideas on natural-born killers or pulp fiction. Here are some tips on avoiding a 1-minute interview. No question is a throwaway. The interview begins the moment you walk in the door or pick up the telephone. So give careful consideration to all of your answers. Exhibit the traits employers are looking for. No matter what you're talking about, emote confidence enthusiasm, energy, and intelligence. Answer carefully and non-controversially. Why open up a can of worms? You may be inviting the interviewer to go fishing. Remember, this is still a job interview, not a meeting of the local literary society or movie fan club. An answer that helps you get the job is preferable to the one that might accurately reflect your literary or cinematic tastes. Now, on to some less than innocent questions that are also less than legal. In a perfect world, companies and managers would judge every applicant only on the basis of the skills and experience necessary to perform the job. But it should come as no surprise that our world is far from perfect. In the real world, many managers and companies discriminate against people of color, people with disabilities, people over the age of 50, even women whom they may simply assume are planning to have children sometime during their future employment. Few of us can claim to be completely objective when judging other people. But the fact is that you, as a candidate for any job, do not have to answer questions related to your race, nationality, marital or financial status, or even a disability if it's unrelated to how well you could perform the job. If an interviewer is foolish enough to make an issue of your nationality, marital status, or other personal information, should you leap out of your chair and make a citizen's arrest right there? No, but you should sit up and take notice. Every state has regulations governing what may and may not be asked of an applicant during the pre-employment process. Just asking the wrong question is not illegal in itself, but it may open an employer up to a lawsuit if an otherwise qualified applicant is passed over for a job based on his or her answer. Few companies are willing to take that chance. So when it comes to inappropriate questions, most employers tread lightly. But regulations don't preclude the subtle techniques some interviewers use to get applicants to volunteer information. As an applicant, it's still up to you to dodge the bullet. The key is knowing when a question is inappropriate and not surrendering any information that might cost you the job. Every question the interviewer asks should pass this test. Does it have something to do with my current job or the one that I'm applying for? Beyond that, it pays to check with your state's Fair Employment Practices Commission for a list of questions considered inappropriate for employers to ask. In the meantime, here are some questions that should trigger alarms in your head during even the most congenial interview. Is that an Irish, or Italian, or Vietnamese name? Employers may not ask about your ancestry, descent, parentage, or nationality, or that of your parents or spouse. It's okay to volunteer that you're proficient in a language other than English, but the interviewer cannot ask you how you learned to read, write, or speak those languages. Let's say your last name is obviously Italian. When you greet the interviewer, he remarks, "Ritigliano. That's Italian, isn't it?" What do? Just smile politely and don't answer at all. It is quite possible that the interviewer meant absolutely no offense. If the interviewer doesn't get the hint and continues to allude to your Italian heritage, you might say, "I really don't see what my ancestry has to do with my application for this job." If you try to handle the situation diplomatically, you can stay on the interviewer's good side. If an employer tries to pressure you into submitting a photograph of yourself to accompany your job application, simply say, "I don't have a suitable photograph available at this time. Of course, if I'm offered the job, I'd be happy to have one taken." The Federal Immigration Reform and Control Act of 1986 prohibits employers from hiring aliens, people who are not properly authorized to work in this country, Once you have accepted the offer, you will be required to document your right to work by surrendering one of the following: a United States passport, a green card, or a combination of a birth certificate or Social Security card and a driver's license. This is a Christian or a Jewish or a Muslim company. Do you think you would be happy working here? This may be a sneaky way of finding out your religious affiliation. Don't fall for it. Employers may tell you which religious holidays the company observes, but they cannot ask you for any specific information in this area. If an interviewer presses you to reveal your affiliation, simply say, "I like to keep my religious beliefs separate from my work, and I respect that right in the people with whom I work." Often the interviewer's bias is not overt. Many interviewers use subtle ploys designed to get you to volunteer just the information that they may use to disqualify you from the running. Are you a family man or woman? You may be, and proud of it, but resist the temptation to whip out the latest pictures of your children. Why? After all, what could seem more innocent than chit-chatting about your fiancé, spouse, or kids? Maybe there is no harm in it. Then again, you never know how an interviewer may interpret your answers. If you're planning to have a child within a year, for instance, an interviewer may wonder whether you will begin to cut your hours at work. If you're engaged to be married, he might assume that you'll be so wrapped up in wedding plans that your attention won't be focused on the job at hand. Interviewers may not ask about your marital status or plans for marriage or for having children. If you already have children, you don't have to reveal their ages or the arrangements you've made for child care. In many states, married women are not required to give an employer their maiden name, unless they've worked under another name at previous companies listed on their resume. Rather than simply refusing to answer a question, you may find it helpful to confront what you believe might be the employer's concerns about your situation. For instance, if the interviewer keeps digging for information about whether you have children, or plan to, he may be concerned about your commitment to the job. You might respond by saying something like, "I sense that you're concerned about my ability to be here on a regular basis to meet deadlines. Just let me assure you that I have always been a reliable worker who's committed to getting the job done well and on time. In fact, in my last position, I was never late to work, and I consistently completed all projects ahead of deadline." Age can be a loaded issue for many employers. If you're in your late 40s or 50s, some employers may worry about your energy flagging or your health failing. Don't give them ammunition in the form of a number. Employers cannot ask for your birth date or about anything that might reveal your age, such as the year you graduated from high school. But age, like race, can be easy to guess. So again, take a positive tack. Play up the benefits of your experience and assure the employer that you have all the vitality for work you had when you were in your 20s. Do you belong to any organizations? Think carefully about your answer to this question. An employer can ask about your membership in organizations, professional societies, or other associations considered important to your performance on the job. But it's a good idea to leave out the names of any organizations that might provide clues to your race, religious creed, color, national origin, ancestry, sex, or disability. Do you have any physical disabilities? Interviewers may only ask about a physical or mental disability that will directly affect your performance on the job. Your general physical health is not fair game, although you may be asked to take a company physical after you receive an offer. The outcome of this physical must be related to essential functions of the job, so the employer has the right to condition the offer on the results. Employers may not ask about whether you have an existing mental condition, whether you've received workers' compensation, had problems with drugs or alcohol, or have HIV, AIDS, or AIDS-related syndrome. AIDS is an area of increasing concern for employers. Although new laws and regulations will likely be written, currently HIV infection, AIDS, and AIDS-related medical conditions are considered disabilities under the federal American with Disabilities Act. If you test positive for HIV or AIDS or any other disability in a pre-employment medical examination, the employer cannot use that information as grounds for withdrawing the offer, unless the illness substantially inhibits your ability to do the job or poses a reasonable threat to the safety of others in the workplace. What's your economic status? A prospective employer may only ask what you're currently earning. Your current or past assets, liabilities, or credit rating are not fair game. This includes whether you own a home or any information about a past bankruptcy or garnishment of wages, except when permitted by federal and state laws governing credit-related information. Again, it's wise to consult specific guidelines in your state. A dishonorable discharge from the military or an arrest that did not result in a conviction should remain in your past. Be aware, however, that regulations do differ from state to state and from industry to industry. For example, under the Federal Deposit Insurance Act, banks are prohibited from hiring individuals convicted of any crime involving dishonesty or breach of trust, even if the conviction is more than 7 years old. Have you ever served in the military? If you have and want to bring to light the skills and knowledge you gained from that experience, go ahead. But be aware that you're not required to give the dates of your military service or the type of discharge you received. Have you ever been arrested? Unless you're applying for a position as a police officer or with the Department of Justice, a prospective employer is not entitled to know whether you've been arrested, unless the arrest resulted in a conviction. In some states, employers may only ask about felonies, not misdemeanors. If you have a record, do some research. Over the past 25 years, there has been a plethora of lawsuits charging employers with discriminatory hiring practices, yet inappropriate questions still are commonly asked during interviews. This is especially true of interviews by hiring managers, who may not be up on legal issues. If you're asked an inappropriate question, you have 3 choices. You can be a constitutionalist and refuse on principle to answer, even if you'd come up smelling like a rose if you did. You can be a pragmatist and provide answers you feel wouldn't hurt you, while you tactfully sidestep questions you think could hurt you. You can be a little of both. Most interviewers who are trying to get at information that is considered inappropriate won't be obvious. Here's a case of subtle discrimination. After making it through 3 interviews for a job at one of the big tobacco companies, a friend of mine thought she was in. But during her final interview, the interviewer offered her a cigarette. She replied, "No thanks, I don't smoke," without realizing that she had inadvertently said no to the job as well. Notice the subtlety. The interviewer never asked, "Are you a smoker?" or even, "Do you smoke?" Turning down an applicant because she refused to engage in an unhealthy activity might put the company on questionable legal and public relations ground. But by getting her to volunteer the information, the interviewer had what he needed to disqualify her from the running. When I heard this story, I couldn't help but wish she had answered, "No thanks, I don't smoke during interviews." Perfectly true, and nearly as coy as the interviewer's gambit. If an interviewer had asked you questions not related to the job on offer, and you believe you weren't hired based on your refusal to answer or the information you did provide, you might have grounds for charging the employer with discrimination. The operative word here is might. The burden of proof is on you. You will have to prove that the questions were asked for for the purpose of discriminating among applicants. For instance, if the manager asking all those questions about Italian ancestry subsequently hired another Italian, you wouldn't have much of a claim, despite the fact that you were asked inappropriate questions. If you do think that you have grounds for a charge of discrimination, you should file your charges simultaneously with the appropriate state agency and the federal government's Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. The EEOC generally will wait until the state agency has conducted an investigation, then conduct an investigation of its own. As you might expect, the wheels of government agencies can creak at their own slow pace. In fact, you might not hear anything for years. Even then, an agency will only determine whether there is reason to believe your charge is true. Therefore, if you are anxious for justice, you should request that the EEOC issue you a notice 180 days after you file your charge. If the EEOC determines that your complaint is valid, it will first attempt to mediate the dispute between you and the employer. If an agreement can't be reached, the Commission will either file its own suit or issue you a letter giving you the right to sue the employer. You must file your suit within 90 days of receiving such a letter. Say that you win your lawsuit. Don't start spending all that money tomorrow. The most you'll probably get from the employer is the equivalent of a year's salary. Here are some tips for fending off illegal questions. Know your rights. Do some research to find out what questions are out of bounds in your particular state, industry, or profession. Don't bring up subjects you don't want to talk about. If you do, the interviewer is likely to ask what would otherwise have been illegal questions if you hadn't opened the door first. Change the subject. If you feel that the interviewer is asking you questions that shouldn't be asked, the first step is to try to shrug them off and change the direction of the conversation. Give the interviewer the benefit of the doubt. After all, you're here because you want the job, so it's up to you to weigh your personal reactions to certain searching questions against your desire to have the job. Many hiring managers may not realize they are in the wrong. Give them the benefit of the doubt. Warn the interviewer subtly. Tell the interviewer in a non-threatening way that you know the questions he or she is asking are inappropriate. This should deliver the message that you know your rights and aren't willing to be a victim of discrimination. End the interview. If the interviewer refuses to back off, end the interview quickly. After all, would you really want to work at a company capable of such narrow-minded attitudes? Okay, you've made it this far. There's absolutely no way to screw it up at this point, right? Don't be so quick to relax. The closing questions of an interview should be handled with care. In short, there are still likely to be some tough questions ahead. Here goes. You've been holding your own, fielding every question volleyed your way with skill and grace. But now it's time for the interviewer to turn the tables. Do you have any questions? Never, I repeat, never answer no. How can you make one of the most important decisions of your life, whether to work for this company at this job, without knowing more? Even if you think you're sold on the position or you're clear on the responsibilities, you must speak up here. If you don't, the interviewer will assume you are uninterested, and that can be the kiss of death to you as an applicant, even at this late stage. While it's easy to get caught up in the challenge of impressing the interviewer with your brilliant answers, it's also important that you don't lose sight of the fact that you also have a purpose. You are trying to determine whether this situation is right for you, whether this job is worthy of your talents and commitment. With this in mind, arm yourself with the following list of questions. Can you give me a formal written description of the position? I'm interested in reviewing in detail the major activities involved and what results are expected. This is a good question to pose to the screening interviewer. It will help you prepare to face the hiring manager. If she doesn't have a written description, ask the interviewer to dictate as complete a description of the job to you as possible. Does this job usually lead to other positions at the company? Which ones? You don't want to find yourself in a dead-end job, so try to find out where this job might lead. What happened to the person you would be replacing? Is he or she still with the company? Doing what? Try to pursue this line of questioning without coming across as if you can't wait to get out of a job you don't even have yet. If you ask in a completely non-threatening manner, your ambition will be understood, perhaps even welcomed. Tell me some of the particular skills or attributes you want in the candidate for this position. The interviewer's answer should tell you how much your traits are valued. With this information, you can underline those traits you possess at the close of the interview to end it on a strong note. Please tell me a little bit about the people with whom I'll be working most closely. I wish someone had told me about this question before my last job interview. The answer can tell you so many things. For instance, how good the people you're working with are at their jobs, and how much you're likely to learn from them. Most importantly, you'll find out whether the hiring manager seems enthusiastic about his or her team. A hiring manager usually tries to put on his or her best face during an interview, just as you do as the candidate. But catching the interviewer off guard with this question can give you a glimpse of the real person behind the game face. If he or she doesn't seem enthusiastic, you probably won't enjoy being part of the team. This hiring manager may attribute little success and perhaps a lot of headaches to the people who work for him or her. What do you like best about this company? Why? This might seem like something you shouldn't ask under any circumstances. If the boss hems and haws a lot over this one, it may indicate that she doesn't really like the company that much at all. If she's instantly enthusiastic, her answer should help sell you on her and on the company. The answer to this question can give you a good sense of the values of the organization and the hiring manager. If she talks about nothing but products and how well her stock options are doing, it indicates a lack of concern for the people side of the business. What is the company's ranking within the industry? Does this position represent a change from where it was a few years ago? You should already have some indication of the answer to this question from your own research, especially if the company is publicly owned. If you have some of this information, go ahead and build it into your questions. I've read that the company has risen from 5th to 2nd in market share in just the past 3 years. What are the key reasons for this dramatic success? Here are some more. What new products is the company considering introducing over the next year or two? Has the organization had any layoffs or reductions in its workforce over the past couple of years? Are others anticipated? How was this department affected? Will the company be entering any new markets during the next few years? Which ones? You say you're anticipating a growth rate of X% over the next few years. Will this be accomplished internally or through acquisitions? Avoid asking about days off, vacation, holidays, sick pay, personal days, and so on. You'll seem like someone who's looking for a chance to get out of the office before you even start. Are you willing to travel? Yes, of course you are. Your family understands the demands of your career and is supportive when you need to spend some time away from home. Does that mean that you want to be away 3 weeks out of 4? Probably not. Unless you don't want to travel at all, don't let this question cost you the job. If the job requires far more travel than you're prepared for, what are you doing on the interview? Are you willing to relocate? If you really are, say so. Absolutely. In fact, I would look forward to the chance to live elsewhere, create a different lifestyle, and meet new people. If you're not, say so. Well, not unless the job is so terrific that it would be worth uprooting my family and leaving my relatives and friends. Does this position require a move? I'm obviously very interested in it, so I might consider relocating. May I contact your current employer? Why do people ask this question? You probably would feel like saying, sure, after you give me this job, and I don't have to worry about getting canned because I've been out looking for another job. But you'll sound better saying, sure you can, after we come to an agreement. I think it's best if they hear about this from me first. May I contact your references? Of course. Tell the interviewer that you will get back to him or her with a list of references that afternoon, or if it's already afternoon, the very next day. Does this stalling make you seem unprepared? Shouldn't you go into the interview with the list ready to hand over to the interviewer? Frankly, in the world of interviews, stalling for a little time before giving references is standard operating procedure. The reason you want to wait is so that you can tell your prospective references that a call might be coming from Mr. Kruger of Trichodecaphobia, Inc. If your references are indeed going to say wonderful things about you, they should be prepared to do so. But here's a caveat. Employers are growing more reluctant to provide references because of a rise in the number of claims of defamation and misrepresentation. Because job references are partially privileged communications, it's a good idea to try to get an inside line about what's being said about you to a prospective employer. As an applicant, you may be able to approach a current or former employer to work out a narrative job reference that's accurate and amenable to both of you. With your consent and involvement, former employers may be more willing to discuss your strengths and weaknesses and the circumstances surrounding your departure in a positive light. Is there anything else about you I should know? You might not think you have anything left to say, but you'd better have. This is your chance, on a silver platter, to close the sale. You'd be a fool to walk away from it. Develop a short answer to this question, one that plays upon your strengths, accomplishments, skills, and areas of knowledge. For example, Mr. Kruger, I think we've covered everything, but I want to re-emphasize the key strengths that I would bring to this position. The job I'm currently in is quite similar to this one, and I would be excited by the chance to apply what I've learned at Widgetland to working for your company. This shows your experience. I run a department almost equal in size to this one. I'm a fair and effective supervisor. This highlights your management skills. I've won 2 prestigious industry awards. I would bring that creativity here. That's your record of success. I'm very excited about the prospect of working with you here at Trichodecaphobia. When do you think you'll make a decision, showing your enthusiasm? This type of answer should underline the points that you've been trying to make throughout the entire interview. By ending with a question, you ask Mr. Kruger to take some action. This is an effective selling technique that should give you a good indication of your chances of getting the job. Here are the keys to wrapping up a successful interview. Be prepared to ask questions. Remember, an interview is a two-way street. Your job is to find out if the company, the industry, and the hiring manager are right for you. Don't be shy about asking the interviewer some rather tough questions of your own. Don't ask about time off, at least not before you're offered the job. Don't ask about salary or benefits. Again, wait until you're offered the job. You don't want money to be a factor when the interviewer is considering whether you are the best person for the job. Prepare a closing argument. This should briefly summarize your strengths, skills, and accomplishments, and underline those that the interviewer has already told you are key to the job. Don't give out the names of your references. Instead, take the time to notify them that they may hear from your prospective employer, and let them know what you want them to stress or leave out. You may be feeling as though you've just gone 14 rounds with Mike Tyson, weary but elated. Assuming you're the winning candidate, What more could there be? Well, there's just one more little jab before the final bell. No one likes to talk about money during an interview. It seems indelicate somehow. But that doesn't mean you should avoid it completely. Just remember that timing is everything. My own rule of thumb is simple. Don't discuss dollars and cents until after you've convinced the interviewer that you're the best person for the job. That's why I've relegated the first question on salary to number 99. Until you've made it over the first 98 interview hurdles, the interviewer is still assessing your ability. And he or she is probably still seeing other contenders as well, some whose talent may come cheaper than yours. But even if an interviewer tries to pressure you into naming a specific number early in the game, avoid committing yourself. Instead, name a very broad range. You might say, I believe a fair wage for this kind of position would be something like $30,000 to $40,000. Be sure the bottom end of that range is no less than the minimum salary you would be willing to accept for the position. Once the employer has made his decision, you're in a much stronger bargaining position. What sort of salary are you looking for? First, you must have a pretty good idea of what your particular market will bear. If you don't know the low and high end in your area and industry, do some research. Make sure you know whether these figures represent just dollars or a compensation package that may include insurance, retirement programs, and other value-added benefits. If you're a woman, make sure you know what men are making doing the same job. You're bound to find a discrepancy, but you should request and seek to earn an equivalent salary, regardless of what women predecessors may have earned. Even more important to these negotiations is your confidence in your own worth. By this time, you've worked hard to sell the interviewer on your value as a future employee. Just remind him of what he's already decided. Harry is a friend of mine who's not only eminently qualified for almost any sales job, but also gives good interview, and he knows it. So when a recruiter called Harry with a job lead that sounded perfect to him, but paid only $40,000, Harry told her, I want that job. Send me on the interview. After they've met me, they'll be willing to pay me what I want. It sounded cocky, but Harry knew what he was doing. During the interview process, he completely avoided the subject of salary. When the interviewer finally asked, what would it take to get you over here, Harry? He showed his cards. I understand the job has a top salary of $40,000, he said. When the interviewer affirmed that, he went on, well, I need more than that. I came here because the job sounded terrific. In fact, the job description Gretchen gave me, and which you've just elaborated on, has my name written all over it. To make a long story short, Harry got the salary he wanted, nearly double that $40,000, because he had already sold himself. If he had asked for the same money earlier in the interview, he certainly would have been out of the running. What if your initial offer isn't accepted? Then it's time to negotiate. The salary you're asking for is near the top of the range for the job. Why should we pay you so much? Remind the employer of the cost savings and other benefits he'll enjoy when you come on board. Pull out your specifics again if necessary. For instance, you might say, I was able to cut my previous employer's expenses by 10%, negotiating better deals with vendors. I think it's reasonable to assume that any additional salary we agree to would be offset by savings I could bring to the company. You've come to an agreement, and the last piece of business before you start your new job. When can you start? If you've been laid off or fired, you can start immediately, of course. But if you're still working for someone else, you must give at least 2 weeks' notice to your current employer. More if you're leaving a position in which you had considerable responsibility. As eager as you may be to get started on this new job, I know I don't have to remind you that it's never wise to burn bridges. You never know when you might have to cross one of them again. So be as accommodating as you can. You might offer to help your current employer find and train your replacement, for instance. If it will be several weeks before you can assume your new responsibilities full-time, offer to begin studying literature or files in your off hours, or come into the office in the evening or on a weekend to meet members of the staff and begin to familiarize yourself with the lay of the land. You might even be called on to attend a company event or seminar. Here are some tips on wrapping up a winning package. Wait until you receive an offer. Defer any question of salary that comes up early in the interview with an answer like, "Colleen in Human Resources indicated the salary range for this position, and it seems about right to me." Or, "I'd like to know a little bit more about the job responsibilities and the qualifications you're looking for before I feel comfortable discussing a salary." Know your worth. Remember that the company wants you. They have decided you are the best candidate they have met. This puts you in a position of power. If they balk at your initial salary demand, remind them of the specific benefits they stand to gain from hiring you. Research compensation levels. Look within your industry and locally, within your city and state. If you don't already know the salary range for the position you're considering, find out. You need to go into the negotiation process armed with this information. Negotiate the perks. Make sure you understand the value of all the potential benefits in the salary benefits package. Benefits can vary widely. Some companies buy employees company cars or club memberships. Others give bonuses or extra time off. Go for the top. If that's more than the company will pay, the interviewer will counter with another offer. Work toward a compromise from there. Get it in writing, especially if you negotiate a complex, non-standard salary benefits package. Be sure you have something in writing, either a letter or memo from the employer, or one you've sent that's been accepted before you give notice to your current employer. Did we cover all the bases? That would be impossible. But we have covered a lot of ground. I can promise you that some interviewers will come up with humdingers that you won't find in these 101. Even some I couldn't imagine. How will you handle them? If you've developed your personal inventory, practiced answers to the most common questions, developed a list of questions to ask the interviewer, and done all your homework about the company, you'll answer them very well indeed. I've asked you to put in a fair amount of work during this recording, but the result should be well worth the effort. Trends show that you're likely to be out there interviewing many more times during your career than other generations of professional people. The better you get at it, the more of an edge you'll have in shaping a successful and rewarding career. If you didn't receive an offer this time, keep plugging. I'll leave you with some tips on after-interview etiquette. And of course, my best wishes for your career success. Once you step out from under the bright lights and shake hands with the interviewer, it will probably take all the composure you can muster not to kick up your heels and run out of the office. But in your haste, don't forget that the process is not quite over. Whether you're waiting by the phone for word or off to your next ordeal, there are a few standard rules of etiquette you should follow. Ask when the hiring decision will be made. If you don't get work by that time, it's perfectly acceptable to call the employer to inquire about the status of the position. Write a thank you note. Make it short and sweet. Begin by thanking the interviewer for taking the time to meet with you. Then restate your interest in the company and the position, and find a way to remind the interviewer of how you can use your skill and qualifications to address one of the key requirements of the job. Type it in business style and be sure that there are no typographical or spelling errors. Here's a good sample. Dear Mr. Jones, thank you for taking the time to discuss the position of purchasing manager with me yesterday. It was a pleasure meeting you and learning more about startup company. During our meeting, You mentioned that you'll be shopping around for a new computerized materials management system. During my years at Consolidated Inc., I reviewed and worked with a number of these systems, and I have a few thoughts about which one might work best for you. I'd be happy to share my thoughts with you at any time. Again, thank you for your consideration. I look forward to hearing from you and the possibility of joining your staff. Sincerely, Jane Anderson. Remember that if you met with more than one interviewer, you should send thank you letters to each individual with whom you talked. Here are some final tips. Nourish your network. If a colleague or former associate referred you to the company or arranged a personal introduction with the interviewer or hiring manager, be sure to drop that person a note of thanks as well. Replay the highs and the lows. What went well during the process? What could you have done better? The point is not to berate yourself for what you did or didn't say. You merely want to make sure you keep doing the things that worked and working on what didn't, so you can ace your next interview. Rewrite your resume. Did the interviewer have any questions that you could clarify through your resume? Did you find yourself talking about things you forgot to include? If so, now's the time to revise your resume before you send it out again. Keep in touch. The hiring process can move at a snail's pace in corporate America. The larger the corporation, often the slower the pace. So don't panic if a week or two passes before you hear anything. No news may still be good news. If time stretches on, it's okay to call to find out if the job has been filled. Use the opportunity to remind the employer of your interest and qualifications. Accept the offer in your own time and on your own terms. Never accept an offer at the time it is tendered. Take a day or two to think about it. Tell the interviewer when you will announce your decision. If you do decide to refuse the offer, politely tell the employer why you're doing so. Congratulate yourself. You made it through one of life's more stressful periods with flying colors. You've proven you're a real pro. Now you're on your way.
Audible hopes you have enjoyed this program.